really good ideas.
Fantastic, marvellous, sharing ideas. Excellent.
Indeed. And that's what we should be doing more and more of. So you're back with me, are you, next week?
Maybe.
Yeah, oh, maybe, all right.
Maybe.
Suit yourself. I shall be here for...
Well, I'm not sure you're here, are you?
Oh, I am for one of them. I'm back tomorrow to do Drive. You can join me from 4 o'clock tomorrow. And then also, very quickly, from Cycle Guy, I'm loving your shirt this morning, David. Much better than your comment, Richard. You wear it well. This is Talk TV. Lively debate, intelligent conversation. Join me, Dr. David Bull, on Talk TV every week.
Straight talking, no nonsense, and annoying all the right people. This is Talk TV.
And a very good morning to one and all. It does indeed make sense. This is Tice Talk for the next 3 hours. It is Sunday, the 25th of September. Where's the month gone? Where's the year gone? Goodness me. I'm here, as I say, for the next 3 hours, and we have got so much to talk about. It's like we're packing in sort of a month's worth of activity and news every single week. Goodness me, what a week this really has been. It started with the incredible funeral of Her Majesty the Queen, and then straight back into politics, full on, with the energy freeze plans on Wednesday. I'll be talking about that later in the show. Obviously going to be talking about lifting the moratorium on shale gas extraction, which I'm delighted about. Many of you know I've been campaigning almost for a year now on this. But as always, the devil is in the detail. So we'll be talking about that. And then the big one, yes, Kwasi Kwarteng stood up on Friday and shocked everybody, literally into stunned silence. In particular, his own MPs behind him, who couldn't believe what they were hearing. He has put everything on black in the casino, and whether or not it works, we will talk about that. We've also got to talk about the very upsetting disturbances in Leicester and Birmingham in the week, and also what's going on in Iran. So much to cover, and much more. We've got some great guests throughout the show, and of course, we'll be talking climate sanity, or insanity, whichever you think it is. And I've got a great guest, the very experienced expert Bob Ward, coming in. He's been very critical of some of my previous interviews and thoughts. He is a director of the Grantham Institute at the London School of Economics. So that will be at about 11:30. You do not want to miss that half hour. You can call in and get his thoughts and views. He is what they call a proper climate expert. Now, I did also want to get some Labour MPs on and some Lib Dem MPs on to talk about the budget. But either they're too scared to talk to me, or then we heard, and this is unbelievable, some of them are going on holiday. Really? Labour and Lib Dem MPs going on holiday at a time when actually people want them in Parliament. We should be shortening the conference season, surely. No, some of these MPs, they're not going to conference, they are going on holiday. We did also ask a PayPal representative to come and talk to us. We'll be talking about that and them excluding certain accounts. They chickened out too. There's a bunch of cowards out there, it seems to me. Anyway, my big question to you this morning is, how do you feel about Kwasi Kwarteng's budget on Friday? And do you want the parties to shorten the conference season so they get back to Parliament earlier? Seems they're not back literally into Parliament until mid-October. It's the third week of September, for heaven's sake. They've just had August. We've got a crisis after crisis after crisis, and there's no one in Parliament. Those are my big questions, but give us a call on anything that you feel excised about or happy about or frustrated about to share your thoughts. You know the number, it's 0344 499 1000, or send us a text 87222 using the word talk, or of course tweet us at TalkTV or at Tice Richard. And then there's another extraordinary headline on the Sunday Times that Liz Truss wants to loosen the immigration rules. We'll be talking about that later, with no thought at all to schools. And we just had a first message in from Tony Tucker, who's straight in saying no thought at all to housing, schools, the NHS. Absolutely extraordinary when we've got 5.3 million people on out-of-work benefits. So give us a call. You know the scene. You are listening for the next 3 hours to Tice Talk here at Talk TV. And hopefully we're going to have the organ music for my Sunday sermon. Love a bit of music. Here it comes. I love that on a Sunday morning, because that means, of course, it is time for Tice's Sunday sermon. And this week, I'm going to talk about daylight robbery. You might wonder where I'm going with this. Just hear me out. Picture the scene. You're sitting at home, downstairs, quietly, thoughtfully. You might be watching TV. You're looking at your mantelpiece, and you've got 3 pots of savings on there. You've been really diligent. You've got your savings pot, you've got the savings pot for your children, and you've got the savings pot for your unborn grandchildren. And you're just quietly contemplating life, and all of a sudden, some very well-dressed official from the government knocks on the door and just barges in downstairs and said, excuse me. And then he smashes all your pots of savings, all 3 of them. And he starts taking money out. And you say, hang on, what's going on? Why are you taking my savings and my future savings out? Oh, sorry, my dear. Sorry, my dear, we've got to keep the lights on. Got to keep the prices down on the energy prices. Really? What's the problem? Well, don't tell anyone, but the truth is that the politicians and the senior civil servants have been negligent for a decade or so, and we're having to cover up for their haulics, for their messes. Really? Oh dear. And you're taking my money. Where's it going, this money that you're taking from my mantelpiece, from my savings, without asking me? Where's this money going? Ah, well, my love, you see, it's going to the rich already rich, mainly foreign investors who own all the wind farms, the solar farms, the gas plants, the power plants, the biomass plants. Yeah. They've already got loads of money, but now they need some more, they say. So we're going to give them some of your future savings. Is that okay? Well, hang on. But they were making decent profits before. Why do they need bigger profits? Oh, don't worry about that. No. It's the markets. Free markets, you see. You know, we have to stick to the ideology of free markets. But you say, no, hang on. Why couldn't they just have had the sort of sums they were getting back in 2021? You know, after all, we're in a sort of global energy war, and surely the government should adopt a warlike response. No, sorry, love. Free markets. You've got to trust the markets. Cannot mess with the markets. So, all right, Mr. Government official, how much is this going to cost the nation? You know, you're taking money out of everybody's houses. How much is that going to cost? Well, not much, love. About 60 billion between you and me. 60 billion? I can't... What is 60 billion? Well, it's about half an HS2, if you can sort of picture that. Yeah, so that's half the HS2, that's what we're taking. Or it's almost double test and trace. Do you remember that, test and trace? Money well spent as well, yeah. About almost double test and trace, half HS2. Wow, that's a lot of money. How long is this going to last, this price freeze? This 60 billion? Well, I wish you hadn't asked, love, because the truth is it's only going to last 6 months. 6 months? Then what? We've just got to pray, love, that Putin turns the gas taps back on. Hang on. What if he doesn't? What if he doesn't turn the gas taps back on? And anyway, why should I pay for the negligence of the idiots who messed this up? It's their fault. Well, I know, love, but the truth is they're still in Parliament. They're still in Whitehall, and they won't admit their mistakes. So hang on, this 60 billion, it could last just 6 months. Yeah, that's right. We don't know what's going to happen after that. But we could be back for more. So could you save a bit more, please? Because we might have to take a bit more of your future savings from your children and your unborn grandchildren's savings. This could go on for years and years. Wow. And then the official leaves. You go and make a cup of tea. You put a bit of rum in it because you need a bit of a stiffener. A couple of days later, some other bloke rocks up. There you are, sitting down. You're having another cup of tea. I've got news for you, love. Yep, we've got a big bazooka plan. Absolutely fantastic. This is the bazooka that's going to grow the economy, unlike the 6 time previously when we said we had a growth plan. No, this is the big one. The bazooka plan to cover up for the fact that we messed up for the previous 12 years. And don't worry, love, I promise you, I know what I'm doing. Oh, yes, indeed. I went to Eton, and then I went to Cambridge, so of course I know what I'm doing. Don't you know? So, here we are, we're going to borrow a whole load more money from your savings, from your pots, your savings, the savings for your children and your unborn grandchildren. You say, all right, well, OK, this big bazooka plan, so what am I going to see of it? No, love. You're going to say, where's this all going? Well, the truth is, love, the truth is that the city bankers, you see, they've been living on Sainsbury's champagne for the last few years, and they say that's not good enough. It doesn't taste delicious enough. No, they want Krug champagne. Yep, they want bigger bonuses to pay for Krug champagne so that they can work out the big bazooka plan, so they can help fund companies to build more, you see. And so the people on the biggest salaries in the city, they need more. They need more Krug champagne. That's the truth. So hang on. Right, well, they're getting a bit of Krug champagne. What am I getting out of this plan? Well, I'm sorry, love, but there's not really a lot left in the mess tin for you. That's the honest truth. In fact, it's worse than that between you and me. Quietly whisper it, but you're going to get a bit less. Yes, you're going to get a little bit less because, you see, inflation's going up about 10% this year. But your personal tax allowance, before you start paying income tax, we've got to freeze that, we've got to leave that where it is. So the truth is, you're going to get less. But don't worry, trust the rich city bankers with their glass of Krug champagne. They'll be all right, they'll sort it all out for you. Now, this is what's called trickle-down economics. Relax. Because apparently, some crumbs of delicious cake, maybe stale cake, but some crumbs may trickle down from the table of the rich city bankers for you, onto your plate. So you might get some crumbs, you ain't getting any Krug, you ain't getting any Sainsbury's champagne, no. Really? Is this really the way to build and grow an economy? I think not. I really think not. I have to tell you, for me, this smells. It stinks. It stinks like sewage. Oh, guess what? The old officially pops round his head round the corner. Now you mentioned sewage, love. Yeah, I'm sorry, we messed up on the sewage too, didn't we? You remember the water companies? Yeah, we privatised those to some other mates of ours. And they didn't bother invest, and that's why we've got a sewage problem. Anyway, I mean, this is it. This is it. It has been a massive, massive week in politics. A massive week in economics. And essentially what the government is doing, this new government, they are betting the house. But what they're doing is they're taking some of your savings, they're taking some of your children's savings, they're taking some of your unborn grandchildren's savings, and they're pouring it in to the top of the economy to prop up the rich investors who own the gas and the wind farms, many of them overseas, foreign-owned, and to prop up the wealthiest in society. I have to tell you, and I say this as someone who believes in growth, who believes in cutting taxes to create growth, I have to tell you this plan is morally outrageous. It is the reverse of Robin Hood. It is pure theft from the poorest in society to the richest in society, the mates of the people in Whitehall and the government. It is appalling, it stinks, it's absolutely shocking. Here endeth my Sunday sermon. Well, there we are. I know it may be a bit dramatic, but I mean, seriously, I want your thoughts on all of this. This has been an absolutely huge week. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Maybe you think that the Chancellor has got this right, that trickle-down economics is the way to go. I'm all for deregulation, getting rid of daft laws, particularly when they come from the EU. I'm all for growth, and cutting taxes to get that. But you do that by putting money in, by cutting taxes for the least well-off, for small businesses. There's absolutely zero, absolutely niente, zip, nothing, null point in this budget for small businesses, for the hospitality sector. Absolutely nothing whatsoever. After the break, we will be talking to the great Justin Urquhart-Stewart, the co-founder of the Regional Investment Platform. Some messages have already started pouring in. Michael has said, Richard, you paint a good picture with your words. We always get to learn something with you. You now seem to have good answers and fresh ideas. Well, I don't know everything, that is for sure, but I do have a view, and this is my clear view. I just think that they've got the right idea, growth, but their implementation is wrong. Absolutely catastrophic. But there we are. You know, it's so important. We've got to get the economy going. But I really do feel they've got that wrong. Tim says, Richard, sermon, what a classic. Well, thank you very much indeed. It has to do. Bob says, I've changed my tune since Friday. Actually, Bob, let's just touch on that. When we heard the news, and I was sitting here with Mike Graham, and the news came through, I said I was pro the growth, but I was concerned that it was directed at the wealthiest in society. And then, you know, having had more time to really analyse it and look at it, and sometimes you have to look at the fine small print to see, well, the devil's in the detail. And actually there's nothing in there for that, for small businesses and for the least well off. So look, Bob, you know, I've reflected long and hard on it, and I'm not very happy. But there we go. We've got another one in from Emily, who I think's, I don't agree with you on the subject of fracking. We'll come back to that later, because that is another big, big issue. Hang on. Oh, Mick doesn't agree at all. Richard, Mick says, your sermon and party political broadcast, I haven't mentioned any party, was the ultimate in childish scaremongering and delusion. Give us a call, Mick, and let's talk about it. Where's the scaremongering in it? Where's the delusion? I'm pro the growth. I just think it's the wrong way. And if you read the newspapers, you can see it's about borrowing from the future. And you can see what the markets think of it. The markets are not very impressed indeed. Stay with me, because after the break we'll be talking a specialist in the markets, and he will have all the answers. Don't go anywhere. It's Tice Talk on Talk TV. Welcome back, my friends. Well, that has got people typing going absolutely wild on Twitter. So, some like it and some don't. One here which says that Richard, let's just find that. I think at Tice Richard has lost the plot this morning on TV. But equally, another one says here, absolutely brilliant sermon, should be broadcast on other channels. Lots and lots of different thoughts Lynx Poacher says, at least Dick Turpin had the decency to wear a mask when he robbed you. Green levies not removed, VAT on fuel not removed, fuel duty not lowered. Those are all the things that I agree with you. Lots and lots of thoughts. Look, to be clear, those who didn't like that sermon, I'm pro-growth. I'm pro-cutting taxes. My issue is where he has cut them. There's nothing for small businesses, and there's nothing for those on low incomes, on average salaries. Nothing whatsoever. That's my issue with it. But let's go to Justin Urquhart-Stewart, who's the co-founder of the Regional Investment Platform, because he is experienced in the markets and how these things work, and he will have his own view. Justin, very good morning to you. Thanks for being with me on Tice Talk this morning. Well, I've got people going in all sorts of directions this morning about the budget. How are you feeling about it? I mean, the papers are saying it's a massive bet in the casino.
Well, it's just astonishing, because if this is a mini budget, God knows what a big budget looks like. There's a huge amount in it. And I have to say, for the first 12 hours, I was scratching my head trying to work out where are the key issues here, and are they actually going to work, and how much risk are we taking here? But I think that one of the biggest issues was the messaging across, as you've been quite rightly highlighting. If you happen to be running a hedge fund at the moment, you'll be feeling jolly happy. Not only that, if I'm being really cynical, this is a hedge fund budget dream, because what was going to happen, well, sterling's going to drop, now markets are probably going to drop, and I can position myself to make a bucket full. I suspect several people have, and just look at some of the donors to the leadership campaign for mistrust. Some of those people do run hedge funds, so they've done really rather well out of it. I want to keep in favour of growth. Let's have growth, but look at the bigger picture. The global economy is slowing down, should be growing about 4.5%, it's about just over 2%. Don't get so worked up over the stock markets, because yes, we dropped by nearly 2%, so did the States, so did Europe as well. And so we are seeing a global slowdown, and so markets are reacting to that, and they're finding it difficulty to see where the growth is coming from. That's, I think, perfectly natural. What we do have to look at is remind people, and particularly the politicians, where does the growth in the UK come from? And that's our smaller businesses. You highlighted there was very little for small business in it. Remember, they are the largest employer by sector in this country, and they need support right now, which is far better targeted at small businesses, low-level incomes, and, of course, making sure people have jobs. That's what I want to see.
That's interesting. You see, but interestingly, I've just had a tweet in here from one called Cooperman. Sorry, Richard, you've lost me today. The approach might be radical, but then the orthodoxy of the last, he says, 32 years, what's that achieved? I thought you were better than trotting out left-wing trickle-down tropes. It might be a gamble, but we need a new direction. And I get what he's saying. Yes, it is a gamble, and I'm all for cutting taxes, but I just think that you will get a higher growth effect by cutting taxes for small businesses and the least well off. That's the big difference that I've got with Cooperman. What do you think?
Well, I think you're absolutely right, because trickle-down economics has been around, well, going a long way back, and actually it doesn't work. Why? Because wealthy people get a bit of extra money. Do they go out and spend it on more food? Well, no, they've already got that. Do I need another yacht or anything? I'm being cynical over it. The answer is they don't actually necessarily put that money back into the economy. Whereas you know that smaller businesses, individuals, give them extra money and they will spend it, because it's actually much more basic in terms of their requirements. So in order to keep the economy moving, the velocity of money through the economy, we need to make sure that they're encouraged to invest. And as we mentioned before, that magic word in any economy, confidence. So confidence.
So picking up on that point, the markets reacted pretty badly to it within seconds of the Chancellor speaking and sitting down, with sterling crashing and the price of government debt, what they call gilts, in a sense falling. So the yield required for investors to was essentially goes up. Do you think why have the markets reacted like that? And how worried should people and indeed the government be, or do you think that's just all sort of noise on the edges?
No, they should take account of this. The bond market is much bigger than the equity market, much more important, frankly, although it does end up being a bit technical for people. But you just highlighted there the cost which we have to spend to finance this debt. We go back, take the 10-year gilt. I won't get too techie over it, but you go back about 3 months, the yield on that was under 1%. Now, it hasn't doubled. That's gone from under 1% to over 4%. that's a huge increase in the amount that we are having to pay people to buy our debt. They trust us because we've never actually been in a position where we've defaulted. Virtually every other leading nation has defaulted. Even some of the American states have defaulted. But we haven't. They trust us. But they trust us on the basis that, hang on, you're not quite as strong as you think you are. I'll lend you the money, but you're going to have to give me something to cover that risk. And so the costs of that, and one just brief figure to put in, this time last year we were looking at a cost of debt about 50 billion, same as our defence budget. This year it's likely to be over 100 billion, which is not just twice the defence budget, it's actually probably higher than the education budget. This is a worrying bit, and that's what external investors look at. Can you really afford this?
And I guess the thing that perhaps investors might have drawn more confidence from, and a lot of this is confidence, as you touched on earlier, is if there'd been any talk about reducing unnecessary, wasteful government spending. You know, the analogy I use is, look, almost all households are saying, well, I need to save £5 in 100, you know, to cut the budget in my household budget. And if actually the Chancellor had said, well, we're going to cut wasteful spending, we're going to send the message to all departments across the piece, you've got to cut £5 in 100, all of a sudden you talk about 50 billion quid of government spending that could be saved.
Yep.
That would have given surely the markets more confidence.
Yes, it given confidence that practical action is being taken. My concern is what I've heard out of the new Chancellor and also the new Prime Minister, not really a deep understanding of the economy and what levers need to be pulled and when. This is much more of a feeding the voters in the Tory party that supported them, almost a big thank you. No, we need to actually focus on those growth areas. And there is some positive news. We know from the futures market that commodity prices are dropping next year, so that pressure on inflation may start to ease off. There's another issue you can actually do as well, and separate out from government debt, and that is particularly money to be raised for being able to help small businesses for the cost of fuel still going up. And you do that by way of a separate, effectively, government loan, which will be funded by the fuel companies over a period of 10, 15 years. So it doesn't have to be part of our national debt.
No.
You're just separating it out, and that would give confidence as well.
But that only works, Justin, if actually energy prices do come down. If Putin doesn't turn the taps back on and prices stay high, then all of these calculations completely go out the window. And you know, that's where I've been so concerned.
Yeah, and I think you're right to be concerned. This is not 6 months. We've got to look at least 2 years of this. And so the government's got to try and provide that sort of support. And it's eye-watering. And we're having to go back to the markets again. Effectively, there'll be more quantitative easing going on. But the more you do, it was a magic tree to start with producing stuff. But we've been back to that tree several times. There are not many leaves left on it now.
No.
And so people start questioning, is this the right policy now when the global economy is slowing down? We need the economy to be starting to pick up. Then we can be investing to actually make sure our exports, good news for the pound here, are now much cheaper.
I mean, it's fascinating. The views coming in on the Twitter feed are, you know, they're very mixed. Some people think that, you know, I've got it right as how one of them describes it. But equally others think that, no, you've got to be radical, you've got to try it. Yes, it's a bit of a gamble, but think that, I've got this wrong. Really, really interesting to hear that. Anyway, Justin, thank you so much for your thoughts there. That's Justin Urquhart Stewart, the co-founder of the Regionally Investment Platform. Fascinating. I'm just going to go to a couple of calls. Lots of people say, great sermon, you know, you've got it right. But equally others say that I've got this wrong and that I'm being too cynical and too sarcastic. I shall come to some of those in a moment. We've got Mike in York on the line. Morning, Mike.
Good morning, Richard. You're dead on. You're absolutely dead on.
That's a good start.
No, I've been in business. I can understand. I can read a balance sheet. What I'd like to say, though, because I'm retired now, let me explain that the gross disposable income in the north is for the domestic council tax is roughly 12%, roughly. In Westminster, in London, it's 4%. So in this, if you like, mini budget, there's nothing for the pensioners, and certainly nothing for the north. But the other thing is the VAT.
Yes.
The VAT, where they're going to refund tourists VAT paid. I knew when I was in business that the VAT scandals where people from abroad were claiming VAT back that they never paid in the first place was rife. So you're just bringing in more criminality into our already creaking system.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it's extraordinary. Strange how he did that, and of course that will help probably retail shopping, the VAT on for tourists, that relief. That will help people in the south, not the north.
Correct. But let me give you another example for everybody listening now. When you get 80, your pension goes up by 25 pence a week. So 25 pence a week, what can you do on £13 a year?
Yes.
Or alternatively, the Christmas bonus, when I was doing the apprenticeship, was £10 a year. Every Christmas you got £10. Guess what? You still get £10 even now. Meanwhile, my apprenticeship pay it's rocketed. What I did is on there is unbelievable. But let's go a bit further with, is it like levelling up? Because there's no levelling up, no matter what any of the politicians say. There's no levelling up.
No, well, that's and you know, I mean, the truth is, there's a great levelling up opportunity with shale gas extraction, because most of that would be in the north.
That's right. But not only that, a lot of my friends, the VAT starting point is roughly 80,000. But when you start doing VAT, it's a lot of paperwork and a lot of man hours to comply. So a lot of people that I know in the industries I've been in, and services, what they do when they get to roughly January, they stop work for 2 months until they get to April, because it's not worth registering for VAT and getting involved with all the grief.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Mike, thank you so much for that. That was Mike in York. Lots of messages. One from Bill here in Wales. Well, Richard, he has cut tax for small businesses. We were expecting the 19% corporation tax rate to go to 25. He said that's not going to happen. Come on, that's very good news. Hang on, it's 19 at the moment. All he said, Bill, is he's not going to increase it from next April. But if you're a hospitality business and you're struggling to survive, you're not worried about tax on profits. You ain't making a profit at the moment. That's the real issue. Where's the help to ensure that you're going to keep surviving, keep alive? That's my point. I'm all for cutting taxes. Another one here with regard to the help for... There is some help for what they call IR35. It says, how small a business you're referring to, Richard? I'm a contractor, and IR35, which is a sort of technical way of taxing contractors and things, is a complication I'm happy to see rolling back. And that, when we see the detail of that, that could be good news as part of unnecessary regulation, lifting unnecessary regulation, as long as it's what they, it's what it says on the tin. But if you want to create growth, my point is you've got to stimulate it from the bottom upwards. Fascinating, lots of people's different thoughts and views here. And some people think are with me on this, and some people think that I have got it badly wrong. Look, it's radical, there's no question about that. And we're all for growth. The question is whether he's got the right strategy. That is my concern. Let's go to another Mike, who's in Oldham, for his thoughts. Mike, good morning.
Good morning, Richard.
Hi.
Totally agree with you, Stephen.
Oh, that's 2 mics in 2 calls. That's a good start, thank you.
Yeah, we're both from the north of England, of course.
Well, there you see, that in itself is right, isn't it?
Well, what I would like to ask, and for people to consider, is this. When people are appointed to the cabinet, to these very important posts, how is it that none of them are qualified for the jobs that they're doing, which includes Mr. Quarting? I have looked him up. Of course he went to university. Did he study economics? Certainly not. He studied history and classics. Another Boris.
Yes, I mean, in theory, and it's a really good point. You see, what I would like them to be able to do is to bring in some experts alongside them into their department, so that if they haven't got the skills themselves, then they've got expertise that they can trust. And I think to a modest degree, I think that Kwasi Kwarteng is doing that. But very often they have to rely on the existing orthodoxy of the Treasury. To be fair to Kwasi Kwarteng, the first thing he did when he rocked up was actually fire the most senior civil servant in the Treasury, a gentleman called Tom Scholar. And actually, I do support him on that. That was a clear indicator he wanted some different thinking.
Hello, can I just say...
Yeah, go for it. One last point, Mike.
Yeah. I fancy quite to be a brain surgeon. I don't know anything about it. So what I do, I appoint an advisor. Now, does that make me a brain surgeon?
No, and it's a really good analogy, actually. And in a sense, my response to you doesn't work in that scenario, does it? It's no good having an advisor telling you how to move the keyhole surgery equipment when you're doing brain surgery. So I think horses for courses, Mike. Really good point. Thank you very much for calling from Oldham. That was a great response to my suggestion about bringing an advisor. I think when it comes to matters medical and surgical, definitely, you need to know what you're doing. Anyway, we are going to take more calls, and coming up after the break, we're going to be talking about free speech and PayPal. I'm sure many of you use PayPal, but it seems that they're only happy for you to use them as long as you think and say the right thing. Don't go anywhere, and we'll be going to Amanda as well straight after the break. It's Tice Talk, it's Talk TV. Welcome back, my friends, to Tice Talk here this Sunday morning. Well, Mitch in North London says, Richard, you sit there sarcastically pick holes in government policy, but to be honest, I can dismantle your economic policy in 30 seconds. You just criticised the government for adding to debt. Actually, I didn't. What I said was, in terms of adding to the debt. It's what they've then done with the money that they borrowed from us and our future generations. That's what I said. We need. He goes on to say, we know your solution is to grow our way out of debt through lower taxes. Correct. And you often cite the US as an example where lower taxes lead to the economy growing. He then says the problem is that US debt has been growing as a share of GDP and not actually falling, and is 30% higher than ours. Yes, but their growth rate is higher than ours, Mitch. That is the point. And if you're going to borrow and deregulate, which I'm all in favour for, you've got to cut out the wasteful, unnecessary spending. And you want the maximum growth. This might lead to some growth. My point, Mitch, is I think that if you inject the money into the bottom of the economy, smaller businesses, and the lowest paid, the least well off, I think you'll get much faster growth. That is my issue. And going back to the US example, the truth is that in many cases, what Trump did with his tax cuts was to cut taxes for the rich. But thank you very much for that. Mitch is a regular contributor and rarely agrees with me on economics. Let's head down to East Sussex, where Amanda is on the line. Good morning, Amanda.
Hi, morning, Richard. How are you?
Well, I'm all right. I'm having some fun here this morning because there's lots of excitement. So what are your thoughts?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I do agree with you, but I'm concerned for small businesses more than anything, because when I saw the tweet from Sacha Lord after Kwasi Kwarteng unveiled the mini-budget, it sort of solidified for me that it's not good enough for small businesses still. And this has been the case all along the last 2 years. Small businesses have been hammered during the lockdowns and everything else, especially the pubs, hospitality, the pubs. And obviously Sacha Lord, represents hospitality. He basically said in his tweets that there will be lots of redundancies now. They're going to have to, lay a lot of people off, that a lot of pubs will close, blah, blah, blah. So it's not good enough. And the other thing is, it's all very well focusing on the mini-budget, but I have to say, I'm sure a lot of people in the country agree with me, if this new government do not sort out the boat migrant crisis, you can forget any kind of tax cuts or anything else, because people out there are so angry about this boat migrant situation, Richard. They're not doing anything about it still, and it's got to stop.
Well, it has got to stop. And we would normally expect a Home Secretary to try and stop that. At least you heard from Priti Patel, albeit she never did anything. But it seems I'm not quite sure we've actually got a Home Secretary at the moment, because Suella Braverman, who notionally has been appointed to the post, has been completely and utterly silent on the issue. Amanda, you're so right on much of that and about the small businesses. I saw that tweet from Sacha Lord, and he really is on the button. What he says, people want to listen to. Thank you so much, Amanda, for your thoughts this morning. Keep listening, keep learning. Wonderful message here from Tim, who says, Richard, I looked at my pension pot this morning following the sermon. It's down £1,000. Sadly, I think that is the case for many. And going back to Mitch in North London, look, Mitch, I want growth. My point is that under my solution, you'll get more growth faster that will benefit more people. That is the debate. That's the issue. Anyway, I'm delighted now. We need to talk about not only growth, but also free speech. And, when you've got some money in your bank account, wherever it is, you want to be able to use it. You want to be able to spend it and not have someone tell you how you spend it, where, or whether you actually need to close your account down. So I'm joined now by the Chief Legal Counsel for the Free Speech Union, Bryn Harris. Bryn, a very good morning. Thanks for joining me at Tice Talk. So this has been a big week in many ways, but for you at the Free Speech Union and also at a newspaper that your colleague Toby Young writes, The Daily Sceptic, it seems that PayPal have basically tried to shut down your accounts and stop you being able to seek donations and payments through their platform. What's going on?
Oh, morning, Richard. It's been a busy week and an interesting week for us. I can't get into the details too much. This is an ongoing dispute. Part of the answer that I have to give you is we don't quite know what's going on. It's not our job to guess at PayPal's reasons for doing this. It's their duty to tell us. I'm sure that their lawyers are reminding PayPal of that. I think it's possible as well that PayPal's lawyers are expressing a certain disquiet about the conduct of their clients. So, you know, we are assessing our options. And one thing that's happening as well that I really want to pay tribute to is the huge amount of support, a huge number of people that have come forward and helped us, from our members, from friendly lawyers, and from people in Parliament. You know, we've got backing in this, and it's been really heartening to get that support.
And I've seen that, and actually I've seen also on Twitter that on social media, lots of people have closed their accounts, they've put that out there. And to be clear, Bryn, I did actually ask a representative from PayPal to come on the show to talk about this, to explain themselves, because this is, you know, really, really important. But they declined, which I think tells a story in itself. I assume other media outlets have also tried. I suppose, playing devil's advocate here, they're a private business. They can have their own criteria, their own views. They're obviously very successful. They could just turn around and say, well, tough, it's our business, we'll do what we want.
Absolutely. And, you know, a lot of people have been bringing up this principle of freedom of contract. And it's not a wholly bankrupt argument, but we need to be very clear. Yes, you can choose who you do business with, but when you have a contract in place with someone, you're not entirely at liberty to behave as you wish. And that's particularly the case for regulated industries such as financial services. You know, because of the importance, because of the potential abuse of power, Parliament and regulators put very specific duties on such service providers. I think as well we need to look at the sort of market economics of it. I mean, you know, as you were saying, a number of people are now saying they'll boycott PayPal. I think the strange thing that's happening here is PayPal is a company saying that it wants to boycott its customers. Now, that's quite a strange marketing strategy in some
Yes,
way.
that's pretty unusual, isn't it, as a marketing strategy, to say we don't want you as customers.
Yeah. So, you know, but perhaps they've got some sort of master plan here. I'm not sure what it is. But I think there is a difficult issue here, and it's not one that our lawmakers have really got their heads around yet, and that's because it's a new issue. But I think they need to grasp it. And the issue is creeping politicization. Transactions that previously were sort of neutral ground, where, we assumed we went into this transaction just as, a customer buying a service. We didn't think politics came into it. And what we're seeing now is, essentially culture war, the treatment of everything as political. And now that that's starting to affect, contractual relations, I think Parliament needs to consider, do we need to preserve these contracts as purely, commercial transactions? Do we need to stop this intrusion into every area of life?
This idea that essentially financial platforms can start to control the way that you spend your own money, or who can actually pay into your accounts, becomes very concerning. I've got a slightly different angle on this, Bryn. PayPal is regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority, and I've actually checked the rules, and I think PayPal are on very shaky ground here, which is why I was so keen to get them on. And if anybody works for PayPal or knows anybody who works for PayPal, have a quiet word in their show-like ear, please, and ask them to come on next week, because I think they're in breach of a couple of the critical principles under which licenses are granted by the Financial Conduct Authority, because I think that there is an issue of the integrity. Are they operating with integrity? And actually, is their conduct conducive to their customers' business? And clearly it isn't. I mean, it's essentially preventing you from carrying out your business. And so they are, I think that not only in Parliament, but also the FCA should be having a very, very good, hard look at this, and possibly suspending PayPal's licence to operate in the United Kingdom until they frankly come and explain themselves.
Well, you know, we're going to be the grown-ups in this, and we're going to give PayPal time to explain what they've done. They have, as they must, they have an internal complaints procedure. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of the debate, but I certainly think you're barking up the right tree. And I imagine you're not the first person that PayPal is going to have heard this from. They can afford good lawyers, and their lawyers will be having a word in their shell line.
Well, it'll be very, very interesting as to what happens. Bryn, thank you so much for sharing those thoughts with me. You know, I think that your good officers do such great work. I really do, and I think it's an outrage. The flip side is PayPal is a private business, and in theory they can decide who they want as customers. But this story will run, and we will keep abreast of it. That was Bryn Harris, the Chief Legal Counsel of the Free Speech Union. And, of course, it's not just them and the Daily Sceptic. No, there's another group called Us For Them, which was the group of parents who were lobbying to improve the welfare of children, lobbying against concerns about lockdown policy. They had their PayPal account shut this week. So this is really significant. Yeah, apparently PayPal may not be, wondering whether or not people should be caring about the welfare of their children. Really? This debate is going to run, and we at Talk TV will be part of it. That is for sure. We're going to go to, this is unbelievable, the third Mike of the morning. It's not even 11 o'clock yet, and Mike is in Poole. Good morning to you.
Morning, Richard. Mike's a popular name, isn't it?
It really is a lovely popular name, yes, indeed.
Well, I don't want to take up your time. I don't claim to be an economist by any stretch, but I just wanted to touch on the currency that we have, the pound. I believe it's the only currency in the world that has remained a pound from when it sort of first started. It's these other currencies are new. So our currency is one of the oldest and most established currencies. But with what's going on at the moment, the currency is being devalued and inflation is going up. So who sets, when we're doing this quantitative easing, which is obviously just printing money, who sets the level of the net worth of the currency? Because we don't have any gold left. So in my interpretation, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the only value the pound actually has is based upon Richard Tice turning up and talking talk radio, and God forbid if he doesn't turn up, if he's not good, that's the labour, that's what's backing up our pound, is our physical ability to work. And if that gets wiped out, if we decide not to have a pound, we could do an arbitrary figure whereby everybody set an arbitrary level of net worth. And this is why it would perhaps lead into the digital currency.
So essentially, Mike, the whole point about currencies is that it's about confidence. It's about investors who own currencies, and of course, currency markets are I think the biggest markets in the world, particularly related to the dollar, and it trades every second of every day. All over the world, but a lot of it is about confidence, and if they think your economy is going to do well, they're happy to hold your currency, and if not, then they sell it.
Exactly. So if we decide to not turn up to work tomorrow and say, look, we're done with this now, our currency collapses, because that's what it's based on, Richard Tice turning up to work. So what I'm suggesting is surely this is perhaps the direction that we're going in, because gambling on the economy, which is all they're doing on the futures market and all these other things, in my opinion, I think that we've been gambled a dice. They can then offset it and say, well, look, it wasn't our fault. It was the COVID, or it was the Ukrainian war, or it was these other things. And they could then flip into a system whereby they put an arbitrary amount on Richard Tice, and they say, right, now Richard Tice is worth 3,000 credits a month.
Well,
and you'll be awarded.
That's right. Well, I think you're alluding to the sort of social credit system, which is being, I think, is being deployed in China, and I think very genuine concerns about a central bank digital currency, where, in a sense, which is potentially an extension of what PayPal are doing, which is basically saying you can spend your money and receive money as long as you're a good little boy or girl, and do and think as we say.
Exactly, but since the crunch back in 2008, all they did was kick down the can, and this ridiculous notion where you can keep printing money because you can do quantitative. It's the opposite to quantitative easing, where they stopped quantitative tightening. Exactly. So I've got in my mind a bar, and I think this is a very easy way of looking at it. If people are unaware, if you've got a bar of currency to your left and you've got an inflationary bar to your right. If currency is dropping, the value of it, inflation is going upwards.
And if currency is dropping, your inflation will go up on goods that you import. Mike, great call. Thank you very much indeed from Paul. Any more Mikes out there who want to give us a buzz? Then you're definitely going to win the competition. After the break, we're going to be talking about we're going to talk about Leicester. Don't go anywhere. It's Tice Talk.
Straight talking, no nonsense, and annoying all the right people. This is Talk TV. Straight talking, no nonsense, and annoying all the right people. This is Talk TV.
Welcome back, my friends, to Tice Talk. We have flown into the second hour. I think there's a bit of a takeover bid going on, a bit of a coup by the mics around the country who are ringing in. Any more mics, very welcome to give us a ring. So that could be quite entertaining, seeing how many Mikes could call throughout the day. If you've never called before and your name is Mike, even if it's first name or second name, give us a call. Lots of messages coming in. One here from Annie says, Richard, I vote for MPs, not advisors. I expect the Chancellor of Exchequer to have good knowledge in finance and economics. Look, I think he does have a fair knowledge, but as was pointed out, he may not be an expert. Maybe they haven't got enough experts. Talking of experts, don't go anywhere, folks, because at about 11:20, we have got the climate expert Bob Ward coming in, director of the Grantham Research Institute at the London School of Economics. He will be with me in the studio to talk about climate matters. He's very excited. He's tweeted in because he was picked up. He's come here in a Tesla. So there we go. And he'll be with us for about 20-25 minutes. So we'll be taking calls as well and challenging him as a climate expert on the whole net zero agenda. And I want your thoughts, your views on that. But meanwhile, again, it's been such a huge week. But there's also been some pretty disturbing things going on in Leicester, which has then spilled over to Birmingham, possibly elsewhere, in terms of some really upsetting disturbances and scenes between young men of the Muslim faith and young Hindus, essentially throwing things at each other, pretty abusive, some violence. The police have had a really, really challenging job. And this has, I think, been very shocking to the respective communities and to all of us to see this in a sense, religious violence on the streets of the United Kingdom. And I'm delighted to be joined now by Dr. Rakib Ehsan, a social policy analyst and writer, to talk a bit more about this issue. Rakib, very good morning. Welcome to Tice Talk. This has been really very difficult for all of us to see with these disturbances. The video footage that I saw, really unpleasant, abusive, and just totally shocking, actually, for all of us.
Oh, absolutely shocking scenes, Richard. And I think what it really shows is that subcontinental style sectarianism and ultra-religious identity politics has very much warmed its way into British life. Leicester, traditionally viewed as a paragon of social cohesion, Richard, a model of state-backed multiculturalism, you could say, but unfortunately that reputation has been left in tatters. And certain parts of the city, if truth be told, was at risk of collapsing into an Islamist Hindu battleground. Quite remarkable.
And, I mean, when you say it was sort of a model of multiculturalism, let's ask the difficult question. Is that or was that true, or was that, a sort of hopeful marketing spin, but that actually there hasn't been enough integration and there has been too much segregation?
Well, I think that there has to be a discussion about the existence of segregated communities. We had the Cantor report and also the Casey review, which talked about the risks of social segregation in various parts of the country. I think that when you're looking at Leicester in particular, perhaps it was relatively successful in terms of integrating its different communities compared to other parts of the country. But I'd make the point, Richard, in recent times, the local political climate has changed somewhat. South Asian politics has come to dominate political discussions there. The sort of bread and butter that you often talk about, cost of living, employment, education, healthcare, that's always been pushed to the sidelines, which I don't think is healthy at all for British democracy. And then when we're looking at Leicester, a great amount of out-of-town troublemakers exacerbating community tensions. So I think, in truth, there's lots of things we need to learn from this.
And that point about out-of-town troublemakers deliberately coming in to stoke up tensions clearly has gone on. I just want to touch, please, Rakib, on community leaders, religious leaders.
Sure.
They've appeared together and given press conferences and said warm, reassuring words, which we would expect. The thing about this, though, is it's very much young men who've been carrying out these disturbances. But here's my question, though: where are the women in this debate? Where are the female leaders who are standing up? And because actually, of course, it's either it's their sons, it's their brothers, it's their husbands, sometimes, that may be on the street. Surely we want to see some women leaders being able to speak up and to call this out as being completely wrong and totally unacceptable in the United Kingdom.
Well, we have seen in Leicester that we have seen female figures in the local communities there intervene and say that this is totally unacceptable. And to be honest, I think we need to see more of that. I think all too often it's been a sort of male-dominated social leadership which has been expected to calm tensions down. But the reality is, I think when we're looking at traditionally, we have this tendency for law and order responsibilities to be outsourced to largely ineffectual community leaders, quite often men. And if truth be told, Richard, I just don't think that's worked very well at all when it comes to issues such as this.
And it requires, look, sometimes it's difficult for people to talk out. I did ask if we could get a community leader or a religious leader to come on the show and talk, and sadly, no one took up the invitation, but it's always there. If anybody's listening who knows someone, we'd love to have them on the show. We have to be brave enough and able to talk about this in an open and constructive way, because it's really serious, and it's the last thing we want to see on the streets of any town or city anywhere in the UK. No,
absolutely, and I think I don't buy into the idea that this means that faith and religion is a net negative in modern day Britain. I think it's ultimately what we're talking about here is the threat of ultra religious identity politics and how that can undermine social cohesion in diverse parts of the country, such as Leicester. And I think unless we have effective social and political leadership and law and order leadership combined with robust grassroots action, my concern is that this could spill over into other diverse parts of the country with South Asian populations.
Rakib, there is a lot of work to do, that is for sure, but we have to talk about it, because if we shine the spotlight, the sunlight on these issues, then we've got more chance of deriving solutions. Rakib Hassan, thank you so much indeed for your thoughts there. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. And guess what, folks? It's happened. From Stoke-on-Trent, Mike's on the line.
Hello, Richard.
Hi, Mike. How are you? The fourth Mike of the day.
Yeah.
What's on your mind, Mike?
Right, well, we have to borrow all this money, right, to subsidise these high gas prices, yeah?
Yes.
Well, it was our plan, wasn't it, to sanction gas, wasn't it, from Russia? The idea was that we were going to sanction gas so he wouldn't have any money to pay for his war.
Yes.
Right? Right. Well, that didn't work out, did it?
You're right. I mean, basically, it hasn't worked out because... the truth is, for a couple of reasons. A, he's selling his gas elsewhere, and B, actually, his reserves were okay. So, in a sense, it's more of a moral sanction than an effective sanction. I think the reality was he was always going to reduce the quantity of gas in the taps. He was always going to deliberately inflict financial pain on the West.
No, I don't think he was. I'll tell you why. Because he said he was at a conference in Samarkand the other day, the Shanghai Cooperation Organisation, what it was called, and he said that Gazprom will supply any amount of gas through Nord Stream 2. It wasn't us, but it was Joe Biden who humiliated Schultz, if you remember, on February the 7th, 2022, at a press conference. He said, you will not use Nord Stream 2.
But in fairness, Mike, the previous US President, Donald Trump, had also said that Nord Stream 2 was a bad idea, and many others. I mean, what it did was it increased the dependence of Germany and other Western nations on Russian gas, and essentially Putin was then using that as a bullying negotiating tool.
The point is, we are saying the West has refused to open Nord Stream 2. Germany, perhaps under pressure from Biden, I don't know what they've got over Germany, but they obviously got something. We are stopping them from using it. They are prepared to use it. Putin said the other day, if you open Nord Stream 2...
I get what you're saying, Mike, but so are you basically saying that the negotiation goes along like this? Either you open Nord Stream 2, or I invade another sovereign nation and kill women and children. Is that basically what you're saying the negotiation is? Because that, I think, is pretty unattractive.
You said that they stopped. You said Putin has turned off the gas.
Correct.
That's wrong, isn't it?
It's right. He has turned off the gas. He's claimed maintenance problems.
He would use Nord Stream 2.
Yeah, but he's turned off the gas in Nord Stream 1.
That's how they don't want us to. They don't want us to get on with Germany. America doesn't want Russia to get on with Germany. They don't like the competition. Europe is as competition.
No, Mike, I disagree entirely. What Trump clearly said to the Germans, who laughed in his face at the UN meeting a while back, he said, you shouldn't be dependent on Russian gas. It will end badly if he decides to turn it off. And the Russians laughed at Donald Trump, and it's come back to bite the Germans where it hurts. Mike, fascinating discussion, though. I've got to go to my next call before my next guest. But thanks for my fourth mic of the day from Stoke-on-Trent. We're going to head from there to Norwich, where Barry's on the line. Hi, Barry.
Hi, Richard. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. What's on your mind?
I'd just like to congratulate Talk Radio for putting these riots in Leicester and Birmingham in the spotlight, because no one else is doing it. And I'd just like to say one other thing about it. Now, it might be controversial for others, but I call things as I see it. You can't possibly tell me that all the 30,000 illegal immigrants that have made the crossing across the English Channel have all been friendly people. Yeah, they come here, they disappear, and they go into hotels, disappear, and never be seen again. And now all of a sudden we've got outbreaks of these race riots. It's what they are, Hindus against Muslims. It's race riots in Birmingham. Now, something has to be done about that, because you can't have these people running around night after night. The police weren't doing anything bad. I see it.
Well, in fairness, Barry, the police there, I think they showed, from what I've seen, they've got a very difficult job. They look very, very aggressive. And they seemed, I'm sure they've done the very best they can. I do know that other forces were having to come in. But you're absolutely right. It's totally unacceptable anywhere in the UK. And in terms of the migrants, the illegal immigrants coming across the channel, well, I'm the guy who broke the story about the fact that 4 in 10 at least were from Albania, and quite possibly foot soldiers for the Albanian gangs.
And just another quick note as well while I'm here. I haven't heard that. I was quite impressed with the new Home Secretary when I heard her, but I haven't seen or heard for her. And in the work the government has been doing, nothing about immigration has been mentioned anywhere from any part of the government. And
well, if you, Barry, take a look at the front page of the Sunday Times, and it turns out that Liz Truss wants to increase the amount of legal immigration significantly to bring in more workers to the UK, which seems totally contrary to what actually I think the people want, because we've got 5.3 million people of working age on out-of-work benefits. We haven't got
My opinion is this, right, with people who are unemployed. If you generally can't work, and you're sick and you generally can't work, it's fair enough. But people who are unemployed, who don't want to work because they're just they class the benefit system as a lifestyle choice. That's there as a safety net, not as a lifestyle choice. They should be taken to the job centre and offered a job. And then the job centre should say to them, look, we've got a job here for you. Now, if you don't want it, that's all good. You don't have to have it. But if you don't want it, then your benefits will stop.
No, you're absolutely, Barry. Many people will agree with you entirely. And it is not good enough, and the Department for Work and Pensions have got this badly wrong. Barry, great call, thank you very much. I've just got time to go to Stephen or Stefan in Manchester. Hi there.
Hello, Richard. Hi. Just a quick one with you. The budget, and I need to talk about this. I think it was the most appalling budget. It reminds me of, we've gone back to Edwardian times. The budget is an absolute outrage. The thing is, this trickle-down economics, it does not work, because I've spoke to lots of my friends, we're all university graduated fellows. Let's just see the top 1% of these people keep the economy afloat now, because the poorest in society clearly can't go shopping on the high street. So now I'm looking at the top 1% in the country to keep the country afloat. Let's see them in Costa Coffee, walking in Primark. And also, this is a budget for devolution. Make no mistake, Scotland will leave the European Union, the British Union, after this budget.
That's interesting you say that. Why do you think that? That's interesting. You could argue that it puts Scotland it puts Nicola Sturgeon in quite a difficult position with the reduction in the higher rate of tax. Why do you think it'll destabilise the Union?
I think it's not only going to destabilise the Union, it destabilises the North-South divide.
That I absolutely agree with.
The people in the north of England are totally... very few people from the north actually travel to the south. We have the Peak District, the Yorkshire Dales, the Lake District. We feel devoid. It's like two different countries. And this was a budget for devolution. I mean, I'm at a point where I think Adrian's Wall should be built across Lancashire now.
Across Lancashire, not between Scotland. Hang on, steady on. I think that may create some disturbances.
But Richard, this is the reality of the high street is dying.
Oh, that is true. I mean, the high street is dying.
The high street even more. Well, the most amazing thing that will come out of this, Richard, and make no mistake, this will kill the high street, because the top 1% of people who've made amazing tax benefits from this, they're not going to spend the money on the high streets. It's the working class people who spend money.
All we can hope, Stefan, is that they make some changes to the business rates, because every high street I go onto, it is decimated, absolutely decimated. Great call, Stefan. Thank you very much indeed. Stay with us. Don't go anywhere, because we have a climate expert, the one and only Bob Ward, Director of Grantham Research at the LSE, on next. And he'll be taking your calls and having a chat with me for the next 20 minutes or so. It's Tice Talk on Talk TV. Welcome back, my friends, to Tice Talk. We are well into the second hour of the 3-hour show. It's been pretty full on, just such a massive week of news in so many different areas. Tweets pouring in, lots of calls. Mike has been, the mics have been trying to stage a takeover bid. But anyway, that's fantastic. Keep those calls coming in, 0344 499 1000. And for the next segment, for the next 20 minutes or so, we've got a segment with my next guest, who is with me in the studio to talk about all matters climate. And so please do give us a call on that number or send us a message, and we can then put those questions through to Bob. And Bob is the director of the Grantham Research Institute at the London School of Economics, and is has a degree in geology and worked at the Royal Society, didn't you?
Did, yeah.
And a fellow of the Geological Society. You're a fellow of lots of things, Bob.
Yeah.
The Royal Geographical Society, the Energy Institute, and a member of the American Geophysical Unions.
Yeah.
Is it fair to say you're an expert?
I'm not a researcher, I'm not an academic, but I spend a lot of time looking at policy.
Right, policy. And so, but I mean, obviously with that background, you would be more of an expert than many. And you've obviously been at the Institute for some time. And this is such a big issue for so many people. Lots of corporations, obviously, very focused on climate and net zero. And in a sense, my view on life is that we all care about the environment. We all want cleaner air. I was delighted, actually. I think you came in an electric vehicle to the show, a Tesla.
Yes.
The issue is actually how we reduce emissions and get cleaner air in our towns and cities at an affordable price, particularly for everybody. That's the big issue. I mean, do you drive a car? Do you drive a car? Have you got?
I recently bought a hybrid car.
Right. Okay. Excellent. So you sort of.
But I don't drive. Generally, in London, I use public transport because it's quicker and easier.
And we're all being told to buy electric cars. And what about heat pumps? I mean, do you live in a flat or a house?
I live in a house. I haven't got a heat pump. Yeah, I still have a boiler that's relatively new. I hope when I eventually get to a stage where I need to replace the boiler, I'll replace it with a heat pump.
Right. I mean, and that is one of the big debates about heat pumps, and we might come on to that. So the big debate, climate change, which obviously, I mean, the climate's changed for millions, if not billions of years.
Yeah.
Do you think we can stop climate change?
This period of warming that we've seen, and it's absolutely clear, period of warming of the Earth that's happened in the last century or so, the only explanation for it is the rise in the concentrations of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. There's no other reasonable explanation. But scientists have looked for it.
But the world has warmed before, Bob. I mean,
yeah, but it doesn't mean that the explanation is the same. So in the past, a lot of the changes have been driven by fluctuations in the Earth's orbit, and we, of course, can measure that very precisely now, and we can see that the Earth's orbit is not fluctuating at the moment. That was what was the trigger for the big ice ages, for instance, in the past. So we can see all of the things, we can measure all of the things that might make an impact, and those, the only way of explaining it.
So what percentage do you think of this recent warming period? There's no question, we are in a warming phase. That is indisputable. What percentage of that do you think is man-made induced CO2 as opposed to natural climate change, because climate change has always gone on and we've come from a pretty low temperature?
All of it is down to man.
100%.
Yeah, because, in fact, if it hadn't been for the fact that we've also put a lot of aerosols, fine particles in the atmosphere as a result of industrial processes, which tend to reflect the sunlight and cause a cooling effect, greenhouse gases would have warmed the Earth even more than we've seen so far. So all of it. And let me emphasise here, all I'm doing is reporting to you what the researchers have found. It's been examined by scientists all around the world. It's published reviews by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change.
We've got to trust them.
Clear.
We've got to trust them that they've got it right. But actually,
well, it's like trusting doctors and any other experts you have, engineers. So we're sitting in a big tower in London. If you suddenly say, I don't trust the engineers anymore, well, you wouldn't be coming into work.
And sometimes doctors get it wrong, and sometimes, sadly, engineers get it wrong.
Indeed.
But actually...
this is 200 years of science we're talking about here.
But the truth is...
I think it would have emerged if...
But the truth is, there's actually...
wrong.
Amongst all the discussion, there's lots of good news that's happened recently. For example, there are record numbers of polar bears out there. There's record levels of coral on the Great Barrier Reef, despite the experts saying the polar bears would disappear. The Great Barrier Reef was irreversibly damaged. The South Pole has just had the coldest winter since records began 60 years ago, almost 60 years ago. Arctic sea ice is recovering, which must be good news. It's within 3% of the 30-year EU average. In the Arctic here, the sea ice this year is at higher levels than the last 11 years, more than 1995. So quite often, the forecasters and the experts don't get it right, Bob.
No, I'm afraid what you're doing is trying to ignore all the trends and taking cherry-picking little data
What I'm saying is that the experts and the forecasters are not always right.
Well, they're right about long-term trends, but predicting the future precisely is difficult. So let's go through some of your examples. So if you show a graph of what's happening in the Arctic, the sea ice, it's very clearly declining. It's going down.
Well, I think we've got a graph,
been going down.
and I think you've got one there.
Yeah, I've got one. Right. I haven't got a graph, though, showing the most important thing, which is where the ice is going. This may appear on the screen,
but we've got here the extent of the sea ice, and this is from the National Snow and Ice Data Centre from the University of Colorado, showing the levels of sea ice in the Arctic in 1995 compared on the same day, 24th of May, compared to 24th of May 2022. And basically, there's no trend of decline over the last 15 years. I mean, the expert Al Gore predicted that there'll be no sea ice.
You can't... This is ridiculous. So May, you've taken one day in May, you've taken 2 days, and you're trying to establish what the trend is.
It's a trend.
The trend can't be told from 2 single days. It's like me saying today is warmer than yesterday, therefore it must be warming, or if tomorrow is cold.
Bob, the ice doesn't disappear and reappear again day in, day out. It's a long-term trend.
Yeah, so if you look at when September is when Arctic sea ice gets to its lowest point. It goes through a refreezing and a melting point. This September was the 10th lowest area of sea ice on record. So part of a trend. It's not every single year lower.
But it's recovering, isn't it, Bob? No, it's not. The trend is recovering. The low point was 2000. Bob, the National Snow and Ice Centre.
I suggest you look at... Put on the screen now the trend showing the area of sea ice. If you show that, go to the National Sea and Ice Data Centre, show the graph, it's down. It's down.
Bob, the low point was 2012, and now it is recovering. We've just had the greatest summer sea ice for the last 11 years, I'm so sorry, and the National Snow and Ice Centre says the ice extent is likely to remain higher than for recent years. This is good news.
No, it's not good news, because what's happening, Richard, is you're taking 2 points and you're ignoring the trend. As I said, it's like saying,
the trend is better in the last 10 years.
If tomorrow is colder than today, you're going to say, oh, well, the Earth is getting colder. It doesn't work that way.
The National Snow and Ice Centre is saying that levels are going to remain higher than recent years. We're well above the low point.
This year.
We're within 3% of the 30-year average.
Yeah, well, the trend
is not down, Bob.
It is. Show the graph, Richard. You can show the graph. Ask your producer now to call it up on screen and show the graph.
I've just shown the graph.
You haven't. This is not a graph.
That is a picture.
That is not a graph. That is a picture of snow and ice on 2 days.
We're going to agree to disagree. Let's move on, okay? Right? We've got the coldest July in the Bering Strait for 70 years. Right? Al Gore said that Arctic sea ice would be gone by 2014. Well, it turns out it hasn't. Other good news.
Well, hold on. That's not true. So what Al Gore... Actually, it isn't. Al Gore was reporting... this goes back, I mean, it was about 10 years ago he said that, and he said some scientists were predicting that we might start to see ice-free summers in the Arctic as soon as perhaps 2014. Now, that clearly was wrong, and as I said, it is difficult doing it, but the trend is down. Anybody can go and check on the National CNI Data Centre. Have a look at the graph. You'll see the trend is down.
You will see the data shows the low point was 2012. And where there's good news, I think we should celebrate it. The other, here's the forecasters. The thing about the forecasters, Bob, this hurricane season in Florida, at the beginning of the beginning of summer, they forecast that it would be much worse than average. It turns out they've been completely wrong, and actually this is the lowest hurricane season in the Atlantic for the last 30 years.
Well, we'll see what the people of Florida think later this year. There's a big hurricane heading for them now. So you're already talking about, it's all going to be fine. But it isn't.
Let's see. I'm just saying the trend is the forecast and the experts often get it wrong. That is my point.
The trend in tropical cyclones, right, in most basins, including the North Atlantic, is up. More of the stronger storms. And we know that this is linked to climate change because the water at the surface of the ocean is now warmer. That is the fuel that drives the strengthening. You're getting more of these rapidly strengthening. So what we're going to see, let me just make a prediction that you can check now. Over the course of this week, that tropical cyclone that's going up into the Gulf of Mexico is going to rapidly intensify, rapidly become a major hurricane.
And we've had cyclones forever.
But the pace at which they become stronger is increasing, that's documented.
But there is good news, Bob, isn't
dangerous,
there?
Dangerous.
There is good news because in the last 100 years, the number of people who sadly died in extreme weather events has collapsed by about 96%. Again, good news.
It's good news.
Excellent.
That we are getting better. Yeah, but that's because we're adapting, okay? We're spending increasing amounts of our wealth are going to be spent on dealing with these impacts. So remember what we've just seen this summer in London. We saw
lovely warm weather.
40 degrees or so. We'll have to see if people really think there is. We saw hundreds of people died. We saw wildfires around the outskirts of London, destroying people's
10
properties.
times more people die in the extreme cold than the extreme heat.
Well, people say this all the time. So what you're saying is people whose family and friends have died of heat, they don't matter because
I'm not saying they don't matter. I'm not saying they don't matter.
Why did you raise it, Richard?
Every death is a sadness.
Every time I talk about people who die from heat, you say, never mind that. People die over the cold.
I'm saying that actually, warmth is a good thing for many people. And, every death is a tragedy, but less people die of warmth than of cold.
Tell me how many fewer people are dying in the winter at the moment because of climate change. Come on, tell me.
But I don't know that stat. What I do know is that 10 times more people die. Bob, it is well documented that 10 times more people die in the extreme cold.
Lots of people die still.
I'm still on the experts.
Of cold weather. If you thought
everybody dies, Bob.
If you thought that climate change was so good, then we'd be talking about what great news it was. The number of people who have
Let's go back to the original question.
Dying.
Do you think we can stop climate change? Do you think we can stop climate change? Do you think we can stop?
Of course we can.
You think we can stop climate change that's gone on for millions of years?
Yeah. So Richard, so let me go back. So remember, I'm a geologist, so I've studied this along with lots of other geologists. Things like changes in the Earth's orbit, little fluctuations are what have driven ice ages in the past. But we can measure that. We can measure very precisely
you can't stop the
our
Earth
position.
Bob, you can't stop the Earth orbiting. You can't stop the sun shining.
Richard, if you want to put your viewers here at greater risk by deliberately not understanding what's happening, they're the ones who are suffering. They're the ones who are having to pay through their lives and livelihoods being damaged. We're getting increasing storms. We're getting higher sea levels, which we're destroying properties across our coastline. We're getting more people dying from heat-related.
Okay. So you think we can stop climate change?
So we're getting people's lives are suffering, and all you're doing is trivialising it by talking. Yeah, of course you are. Talking about, you can't stop the Earth orbiting. It's got nothing to do with that.
How are you going to stop climate change? So if we get to net zero, do you think that stops climate change?
That's what will stop when we get greenhouse gas emissions down effectively to zero. The concentrations will stop and the temperature will stop rising almost within a few years.
Right.
Within a few years, probably within a decade.
Right, so the international...
But sea levels will continue to rise because the
intergovernmental...
warming...
Bob, the intergovernmental panel...
cause sea level to rise will continue longer.
The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, says that when we get to net zero, it'll take how many years to stop sea level rise, which is one of the things that people are most concerned about climate change? How many years?
It will go on for centuries,
right?
Because the amount of heat.
So we get to net zero. It's not going to make any difference. The IPCC says it's going to make no difference for 200 years plus to sea level rise. So it would be better to adapt and build sea level defences.
Sea level rise is not the only thing that matters. People are suffering through loads of different impacts of climate change, including increased heat. Increased rainfall. Remember, a warmer atmosphere holds more moisture. It means it rains harder. You get more flooding. It seems to me like you don't care about the fact that more people are suffering in this country from increased rainfall leading to flooding. These are the impacts that are happening that are affecting your viewers, and you're refusing to engage with it.
My point is, I'm engaging with it, right? I'm actually also doing my bit to reduce emissions, more than, frankly, most people. I've got an electric car, you haven't. I've got solar panels on my buildings, you haven't. You haven't got a heat pump yet.
Well, congratulations, Richard. So I don't know why you're arguing that there's no problem.
The point is, I want cleaner air in our cities and towns. I don't think it'll stop climate change, because climate change has gone on for millions and millions of years. So we need to adapt. What we should do is we should adapt.
Why do you think that every single reputable scientific organisation in the world accepts?
I'm glad you raised that.
The evidence is very clear because the Earth is warming, and it's being driven by greenhouse
I'm glad you said that.
Why is it that four
highly reputable Italian scientists have just produced a study saying there's no evidence of a climate emergency? Why is it that other scientists, 1,000 of them, and professionals have signed something called the World Climate Declaration from Clinton? Why is it Dr. Richard Lindzen from the MIT has said the IPCC narrative is ill-conceived, simplistic, and undermined by observational evidence?
What you're doing
there is
basically,
a debate. There is a debate.
If you go and get a medical diagnosis from a hospital, medical experts, you either decide to accept it, or, in your view, you go down the pub, you find some crank who'll tell you something different that you like,
Bob, you cannot call those four Italian scientists cranks. They're very qualified. You cannot call Dr. Richard Lindzen a crank.
Richard Lindzen doesn't believe that smoking causes lung cancer.
I do actually.
He has lots of peculiar ideas about lots of things.
Recommend people get a second opinion, because of what I've shown earlier.
But not from some guy you met down the pub.
No, from other scientists and experts. What I've shown clearly this morning, Bob, is that experts often get it wrong. In fact, even you yourself got it wrong. You spoke at a conference in 2015, April 15 in Dublin, where you said that sea level rise before the end of this century was likely to rise by 2 metres, and yet the Royal Society you're a member of...
I didn't say likely to rise.
You did say that?
No, I didn't.
You did. The Royal Society you're a member of said it'll rise between 0.4 and 0.8. The National Tidal Sea Level Society says it'll rise by 0.2. So even the experts have different views.
Understood. So we all talk about the uncertainties in it. At the moment, sea level rise is going at a pace that we think it'll probably exceed a metre compared to pre-industrial times.
How much is sea level rise in the UK at the moment, Bob, per annum?
So you have to separate out the effect of the global rise against local land changes, different parts of the country going up and down.
Roughly.
But roughly around our coastline, the overall effect is about 3 millimetres a year, which is what is happening around the world. But in individual places, they were going up and down. They're still rebounding from the last ice age.
Right.
So
that's 3 centimetres a decade. So that's 30 centimetres in 100 years. That's not a metre,
but it's
Bob.
accelerating. It's accelerating, Richard. You can't draw a straight line through it. It's accelerating. It's going up.
The truth is, you think you can stop climate change. I don't. Let's see what our callers think after the break, because we are going to take a quick break. Give us a ring, 0344 499 1000. It's Tice Talk on Talk TV. Welcome back, my friends, to Tice Talk here on Talk TV. And we are having a sparky debate with Bob Ward from the Grantham Research Institute at the London School of Economics on all matters climate. And some of you have given a call, loads of messages coming in. One saying I'm talking too much. I'm sorry about that. I guess the clue's in the name, Tice Talk. Anyway, I think we've got a couple of callers. We've got Darren in Suffolk for Bob. Darren, good morning. What's your question for Bob?
Yeah, good morning. Do you know, if you're a football fan and you watch a football game and you're one-sided, you don't see the balanced view. You've always got, you know, your team's more important. You can't see what's really happening on the pitch. I think some of these scientists, they get so sidetracked with this has to be the solution, they don't step back and see it. Now, look, take electric cars, for instance. There's a lot of experts that you see online. You don't know whether these are accurate or not, but they talk about what it takes to make a battery, and the fact that you can't actually recycle the battery. If some of these are true, and it really does take 100 barrels of oil to make a car battery, and kids are dying getting the zinc and the minerals to actually make these car batteries, and the fact that my friend's going to cost him £20,000 to charge 2 hybrids a year because of the cost. This is not the practical solution moving forward. And it's interesting that we talk about CO2, because back in the 70s, it was let's get lead out of petrol because it's bad for the environment. Then it became CO2. We talk about methane. We talk about nitrogen. It's as if there's something that needs to meet the narrative to get it right.
Okay, Darren, let's let Bob answer.
Well, I hope you'll agree that it was a good idea to get lead out of petrol, because lead is what was leading to poisoning of babies and in the environment. So we have a long history of recognising problems and trying to tackle them. With electric cars, it's quite true that, like the need to manufacture the batteries for conventional internal combustion engines, you do need energy and you do need a lot of different metals and materials. And in the end, we're going to have to find ways of having sustainable supplies of all the materials and to be able to recycle. Fortunately, a lot of our industrial processes now are finding alternatives to fossil fuels. For instance, when you make steel, you won't necessarily have to use electricity from coal-fired power stations or even coke. You might be able to use hydrogen and start using electric arc furnaces. So we are moving slowly towards it. And in the end, I think most electric car owners are finding at the moment that their bills are much lower than those who have petrol-driven cars, because the price of petrol and diesel.
Darren, great question. What I do know, and it is a good point about the lithium, we've actually got lots of lithium here in Cornwall.
Yes,
I've had one of the producers, and I would like to see us, using our own resources. We might have time to touch on sugar. Darren, great call. Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Basingstoke, where Simon's on the line. Hi, Simon.
Yes, hi, Richard. Thank Mr. Ward for coming on the show. I have several questions for him.
Make it one, because we've got loads of calls. Just ask one critical one.
Right, OK. Well, I'll ask the question about settled science. Unlike Mr. Ward, I have a physics degree from University College London, and there is no such thing as settled science. Physicists believe that the Earth moved through an ether in the 1900s until a little-known patent clerk called Albert Einstein came out with his general and special theories of relativity. And one of the biggest fear I have about the attitude of the climate scientists is they are ascribing attributes to it that aren't applicable. The climate system is a non-linear system. That means you cannot make long-term predictions unless you know the exact state at which that system started. And I'd like to see Mr. Ward address that question, because I would say that what he's claiming is not even theoretically possible.
Thank you, Simon. Bob?
Yeah, so let's start with observations. It's unequivocal that the Earth has been warming over the last 100 years or so. And the climate scientists, who are mostly physicists, remember, most of them are physicists, have been studying what has been driving that. They've concluded that it's the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere primarily that's been driving that. You're quite right that it's a complex system. It is very difficult to model the climate and to simulate it. That's why they have to use computers to do the complex physics calculations. I'm afraid that most people who oppose the science on climate change think that the use of computer models is somehow a trick. But frankly, every area of science at the moment, medicine, engineering, physics, they all use computer models.
Bob, do you accept
it's too complicated not to use computers?
Bob, do you accept in the medieval warm period and the Roman warm period that it was 1 or 2 degrees warmer than we're currently?
No, it isn't. It isn't.
Well, that's what the lots of data and graphs.
No, I've seen the graph that you've shown, Richard. So
you haven't seen this one.
You
haven't seen this one, actually.
Yeah, I have seen it. You've been tweeting it before, and it's what Brian Catt presented to you a few weeks ago.
It's based
on a Greenland ice sheet core, and it's only showing Greenland, and it's basically attributing it to a study which doesn't cover that period. It actually was invented by Anthony Watts, who is a blogger in the US.
Hang on, but this is from ice cores from Greenland. So you're questioning that data and that science?
What I'm questioning is whether you can get a global picture from a single ice core.
So you deny that there's been warmer periods. You think we're at the warmest period ever, is that right?
We are currently warmer now than we have been in the last 12,000 years since the end of the
Despite multiple graphs showing that actually it's been warmer.
There's not multiple graphs. Well, I can tell you, Richard, the graphs that you've been showing have been invented by bloggers. They've not been produced by scientists. The scientists, if people want reliable science, they should go and have a look. They should have a look at the website of the Royal Society or the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change or the Met Office. Go to a reputable science organisation. Don't go to some blog.
This is not some blog. This is data from ice cores from Greenland, produced in multiple different things. I'm happy to show it. I'm going to move on.
It's wrong. It's a fake graph, Richard.
So you think it's fake and fraudulent, but despite the fact there are multiple graphs of it, fine. No. You don't think it's the warmest period. Let's get down to Essex, where Peter's on the line. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Richard. Yeah. Well, I would like to say to your guest there is, he's like all climate evangelists. He gives us all these things about this is going up, that and going up. Surely the whole truth is how much more CO2 is in the air now than there was, and there's hardly any. Al Gore was 20 years ago. He came on the BBC and he said the world was going to warm 3 degrees in 7 years. I remember this distinctly. And all the ice on the North Pole.
Great question.
Flood everywhere. And it was total rubbish, wasn't
it? Peter, great question. How much CO2 now have we got in the atmosphere?
Yeah, so it's approaching, getting close to 420 parts per million. Before industrialisation, it was about 280. So it's gone up by about 50% since industrialisation.
John Kerry wants to get rid of CO2 in something that I saw him saying, but actually CO2 is a good thing, isn't it? I mean, it's not a poison. We need CO2 for photosynthesis, for plants to grow, and that increase. Is it a coincidence? And it seems to me we've got, in the last 40 or 50 years, the world is greener. Across the world, the planet is greener. Maybe that's because there's more CO2 in the atmosphere.
There certainly has been a stimulus.
But that's good news.
But it is good news, but it hasn't made up for the massive deforestation that's been going on around the world.
I'm with you on
far worse.
I'm with you on deforestation, but more CO2 has led to more greening, which means more cheaper food, which means billions of people are leading longer, healthier, happier lives.
If that was all that was happening, Richard, if all that was happening was that you were giving more CO2 to plants, then fine, but we're not. It's changing the climate and it's hurting people all around the world. It's damaging lives and livelihoods as a result of changes in extreme weather.
Where's the hurt of cheaper, more plentiful food, meaning billions of people are leading longer lives?
In the people whose lives are being damaged by flooding along coastlines, by flooding from heavier rainfall, by droughts, by heat waves, but all of these impacts that you're ignoring. You're pretending that it doesn't matter.
The debate about this is, in my view, we need to adapt. We need to invest money in sea level defences, which is much, much cheaper than the mitigation you want in order to try and stop climate change, which is not stoppable.
So it's only cheaper if you don't have high levels of climate change, and the problem is that we've had 1 degree of warming at the moment, just over 1 degree. We're struggling to deal with that. The wildfires around London during the summer didn't look to me like that was we were adapting to that. And if we get up to 2 or 3 degrees of warming, Richard, that's going to be beyond, not just beyond historical,
but
even our evolutionary experience. Humans have never lived in a climate
Even you in
like
your
that.
Dublin talk 7 years ago admitted that slightly inconveniently, actually temperatures were plateauing, that global warming wasn't increasing.
Yeah.
Now, we've got another caller here, Mike from...
No, I didn't. I pointed out that you get short-term fluctuations, but there was a long-term upward trend. Again, you're getting completely confused by the noise.
I'm quoting you.
The signal.
Let's go to Mike, who is calling from a mobile. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Richard. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good.
I don't know who that guy is that you've got there.
It's the expert Bob Ward from the London School of Economics, Mike.
What's he an expert in exactly? He doesn't seem to mention the hugest and most massive effect that has changed the planet over the past several centuries, and that is the increased population. So clearly the best thing to do to get rid of the climate change, which is affected so much by the numbers of people who are now living here, is to somehow start reducing the size of the population. Surely that would be something he would favour.
Well, if you're volunteering for you and your family to depopulate the Earth, then I suggest you go ahead. But I'm more interested in improving...
All you got to do, Richard, is scratch the skin of these bozos, right? They start asking you to kill yourself. That's nice, isn't it? Marvellous. I think you're barking up the wrong tree,
I think people... I'm interested in making people's lives better. I'm not interested in telling people that they can't have babies, or you have to reduce people's family sizes. There's a long history of people of policymakers trying to do that. I'm not interested in trying to convince people that they should be having smaller families.
But do you think that the numbers of people on this planet, because it's increased by a massive number, has had any effect on the climate?
The problem has been the consumption of people.
Yes or no?
I don't think people are the problem.
Has the increased population increased the problem?
I'm sorry you think that people are the problem. People are not the problem.
But people
are affecting it.
People living unsustainable lifestyles, consuming the Earth's resources and polluting it so it damages other people's lives. That's the problem.
People living in the slums of Bombay, those people?
No, they're not the people. The people who have unsustainable lifestyles.
Mike, I've got to go because I've got to finish off. Mike, great call. Bob, just before we finish, your institute is funded by a variety of donors, including the UK taxpayer is contributing significant sums. From the website, I saw about £7 million, which is obviously a major sum of money. Are there anybody in your team who is looking at it from the different side of the argument, from a sceptic side of the argument, in a sense, deliberately challenging your view of the debate?
There are lots of people trying to find out, because you'd win a Nobel Prize if you could overturn 200 years of science. Yeah, I've got people in my team who look at models all the time. They can't find the evidence. People have been trying for 200 years, Richard. I think they would have found it if it was an alternative explanation.
You've got £7 million worth of taxpayers funding. I think we need to make sure that people are properly looking at the debate. We have had a full-on active debate with Bob Ward. Lots of messages and tweets coming in. I'll get to those later. Because it really is, there's just loads and loads of thoughts. We haven't had time to talk about shale gas. Maybe, could we finish? That's good news, lifting the moratorium, shale gas, cheap UK gas, jobs.
Yeah, Richard, so tell me, how much do you think energy bills will go down this winter as a result of...
Well, not this winter, but it can in the future, because we can have local domestic...
So it'll make no difference this winter?
Not this winter, but in terms of our self-reliance...
It's been a massive distraction.
No, it's not
energy
a distraction.
efficiency is where we should be talking at the moment. That will reduce people's bills.
Fantastic. Stay with us, don't go anywhere. We'll take more calls. It's Tice Talk, here at the home of common sense, where we have wide, difficult, sometimes challenging debate. It is, of course, Talk TV.
The biggest issue in Britain right now has to be cost of living. How much everything is costing all of us to get to work, to pay for food, to pay for electricity and energy, and that's not a problem that's going to go away anytime soon.
Straight talking, no nonsense, and annoying all the right people. This is Talk TV.
Welcome back, my friends, to Tice Talk. We are well into the third hour of the show this afternoon, just after 12 o'clock. I hope you're enjoying the music. But anyway, we have had a full-on debate with Bob Ward from the Grantham Institute. Loads and loads of messages coming in. Lots of people not happy that even I had someone from the other side of the debate. But actually, it's important to have the balance. And as you can see, he got excitable, I got excitable. Sometimes that's how it is, because it's a big, passionate debate, but it's important to have the debate. And also, it's very important, our lovely friends at Ofcom are very keen that we have a variety of views from different sides of it. And I think actually what we did establish is that there are different scientists, different experts with different views on this vital subject, but it's important we debate it. And that's, a critical issue. There was the issue, and a number of people have tweeted in about really that UK taxpayers funding that institute to the tune of £7 million, not in just 1 year, but over a couple of years. I'm not convinced that there's anybody really challenging within that, and I think that is important. Some of you are grateful for Bob's thoughts and views, but I think many people very, very sceptical. The key thing that I took out of that, and I welcome your thoughts and your calls on it, was that Bob Ward thinks you can stop climate change. That if we get to net zero, the climate will stop changing, even though it's changed for millions of years. What do you think about that? 0344 499 1000. At the back end of that discussion, we just touched on shale gas, because this week it's been announced that the government plans to lift the moratorium on shale gas exploration with fracking. That sounds great until you think, well, yeah, but it requires a local consent, and there is no one who understands the issue of local consents more than my next guest I'm delighted to have on the show, Lorraine Allenson from Yorkshire. Lorraine, a very good afternoon to you. How are you? So, I don't know if you...
I'm fine, thanks.
I don't know if you heard any of that debate with Bob Ward, but the issue of shale gas, I mean, you were very involved some years ago. You wrote a book about it. What's your views about the lifting of the moratorium? Are you excited by that, or are you deeply gloomy about the issue of local consent and may it never happen?
I'm really thrilled that they have lifted the moratorium on shale gas, but I have reservations of how it was done by the government, because they should have put together a good PR programme that would have got the truth and the facts out there about what happens with hydraulic stimulation. Instead, we were back to this circus of protesters and claiming they're going to protest everywhere. You've got to remember, last time I lived in a community that were affected by a shale gas well near Kirby Mispitten, near Pickering. And what happened was we were invaded by outside protesters, and locals didn't get a voice. And if you tried to have a voice, which I did, I was in favour of shale gas, you were silenced. And I'll just give you a quick rundown of some of the things that happened with these peaceful protesters. There was a company that was supplying my broadband, and they cut my broadband off because I was in favour of fracking. And they denied it, but actually they sent that email at the precise time I was speaking in favour of the planning application at North Yorkshire County Council, so they can't deny that. Also, we had protesters. They took over a farmer's field and built this ramshackle, dirty camp. And when they finished with the camp, by the way, they just made a great heap of the refuse and burnt it. And they said they were burning their war chamber. You know, and the antics they got up to, they would block the village street by laying across it, locking on. They would jump on lorries, hijack lorries. And they would also, one of the worst things they did was they broke into the well site, climbed the workover rig and set off a live flare above a live gas well site, endangering not only the workers but the police and the local villagers.
So, Lorraine, your experience has obviously been that the anti-shale gas lobby will be very intense and unpleasant and potentially aggressive. So, looking forwards, do you fear that in a sense, subject to local consent, which is the sort of that's the condition. Do you think that essentially is going to stop it?
I think it has to be made of national significant infrastructure, actually, so that you can't have all these protests and you get these green NGOs, Friends of the Earth, Greenpeace, Food and Water Watch, who are actually based in America and not based here at all, but they campaigned against fracking over here. You know, they take over the narrative. When do the locals get actually a voice? And how will they define local support? Will we get a referendum? How are they going to do that? You know, because you're going to get all these outside voices coming in, which we did last time, and they take it over. I mean, to be a councillor, because somebody said about, well, let the local councils decide. But I've been in planning meetings, that the protesters are there. They've got placards stuffed in the faces of the councillors. It takes a brave councillor to say, yes,
it does indeed.
Let's have it. They're very much intimidating and bullying.
And Lorraine, there's a suggestion that I put forward some time ago that I think is under active discussion by the government and indeed by the industry, which is, and I have an expression, national planning regime with fixed local compensation. And if there's the idea that people within X number of miles of, let's say, a shale gas pad would receive a discount off their bills of, for example, 50% for the duration of the pad, to what extent do you think that might shift the numbers on local consent?
I think it'll certainly help. I don't like the word compensation, by the way, because it's not the end of the world. It's been overhyped. Has the issue of shale gas.
Let's call it a discount, but you get my meaning.
Discount. I think direct payments to people who live near well sites would be a great thing. It's a bit like in America, they own their own mineral rights, so they get royalties. Well, let the local communities benefit. Yeah, I'd love cheaper energy. I think that would be fantastic. You know, it's got to bring benefits, and I think that's an ideal way of doing that. And I see they're talking about actually a sovereign wealth fund about the profits from shale gas. That would be brilliant. Norway has one, you know, and they can rely on that to help them. They've used it, I think, recently, you know, to help their country with inflated energy prices, you know. So there's a lot that can be done, and I think it would help persuade people to accept well sites. I live in the Vale of Pickering. It's a gas field. You know, there's 9 well sites, and there was a generating station. They've actually decommissioned that at the moment. But you don't know they're there. I've lived through it. There was a fuss when they were going to build the generating station back in about 1990. You know, we had the same thing for testers. It's been there running perfectly well. Nobody's died. Nobody's been poisoned. Nothing's happened. You don't even know it's there operating. Same with the well site.
And obviously, this is a really big thing. You know, when I've campaigned knocking on doors in the north, where obviously communities have had jobs and wealth created from essentially from mining historically. You know, people understand the importance of using the energy treasure. My sense is that actually the majority of people would support it, particularly if they live near and they're going to get a bit of a discount for some lorries trundling by. But I guess the key is the government's got to they've got to issue planning consent at the national level. Do you agree with that?
Yes. You can't leave it to local councils and local people. It's got to be done nationally, really, by the government, because you're only opening people up to the next level of the circus that we had before, and that's really hard on the locals, and it's cruel to put them through it again. Whereas, and also, that leaves it open for legal challenges by the green NGOs, who are only doing that to delay the process all the time, and they're profiteering from it, really.
Well, actually,
scare the population.
No, you're so right.
Yeah, and they scare the population, and then they'll get donations.
And there is an issue about and there is an issue.
Green NGOs.
There is an issue, Lorraine, with the legal challenges, what they call judicial reviews, is that they are run on what's called no win, no fees by some of the very smart, very sharp London-based lawyers who know how to do this stuff. And again,
Absolutely.
that doesn't seem fair. Just one final point. Lorraine, lots of people on the other side of the debate, the anti-shale gas lobby, the Labour Party and co, they're saying, well, it wouldn't make any difference to the prices. Do you agree with them, or do you agree with me?
I agree with you. because it will make a difference to the prices. The more you produce of something, the cheaper it gets. But if you're allowing the local people to have cheaper energy, that helps them. Also, you know, they could do, the industry has actually volunteered that they would, you know, allow, they're willing to sell the gas at a contracted price, is what I'm trying to say. And also, by producing our own gas, we will be displacing LNG that we're having to buy very expensively. Now, we're taking the market, LNG, off poorer countries because we're too precious to produce our own gas. Who do we think we are that we shouldn't be providing our own gas? Are we so important in the world that we want to buy fracked gas from everywhere else and allow other countries to be even further impoverished because we're going to buy all the gas? We need to produce our own, and it needs to be from under our feet.
A good one here, and actually, just whilst we've been talking, Lorraine, Tony has tweeted in, Richard, I back fracking, but who owns the gas? Or is it like minerals with the gas below that it's owned by some ancient lord?
It's not owned by an ancient lord. I believe the government owns the mineral rights.
That's absolutely right. It's owned, Tony, to answer your question, it's owned by all of us. It's our treasure because it's actually owned by the Crown Estate, and the Crown Estate is owned by the Treasury, and of course the Treasury, that's taxpayers' cash. Lorraine, thank you so much. This is the beginning. I suspect there's going to be some long debates, some fairly hard battles ahead, but I know you are a big advocate, and you've got more experience almost than anybody in this topic in terms of trying to get local consents and the anti-lobbying. We're going to take a quick call now. That was Lorraine Allinson from Yorkshire, a businesswoman who supported shale gas for almost a year. Stephen's in London. Hi, Stephen. Good afternoon.
I just want to explain why I think trickle-down economics works. But if I could just quickly first talk about the energy, the privatisation of energy. You're confusing privatisation with free market. Privatisation doesn't necessarily mean free market. You need free entry into the market, and by having a government licenses prevent other companies from entering. The East India Company was a private company, but because it had a monopoly, because it had a license of the government, no other companies could trade with India.
That's right, absolutely. But if you take something like UKPM, which owns all of the electricity cables in London and the South East, that's privately owned, and it's not a free market; it's a monopoly, isn't it?
Exactly. So privatisation does not mean necessarily free market.
Correct. Sometimes it leads to a monopoly, which is bad news. What was your other point, Stephen?
Regarding trickle-down tax, if you reduce the taxes of the richest people, those richest people are either going to spend their money on things. They're either going to invest it in their own company, or they're going to invest it in stocks and shares of other companies, or they're going to put it in the bank, and then the bank will invest it in other companies. So trickle-down does work in that way. It's not like rich people hoard the money under their beds and take it out of the economy. But you're right, they should have done that for the smaller businesses as well, and the poor people. They should have reduced taxes as well for the smaller people to stimulate them as well.
Yeah, my point, Stephen, is I'm not saying it doesn't work, but I think it doesn't work as effectively and takes longer than what I call the bottom-up multiplier growth effect. If you put money into the bottom of the economy, it will grow, and you'll get a bigger circulation of that cash, and therefore the growth will be greater, faster. That's really my observation.
Well, I don't know if there's a difference in the time, but both ways work. And as long as you give people the money back, it's going to be invested into the economy. If you give it to the government won't spend it well. Correct. They'll invest it according to what the lobby groups, or they'll invest it in their own constituencies to get re-elected. So the money won't be invested for economic reasons, it will be invested for political reasons.
Absolutely right. Civil servants will always spend taxpayers' money worse than an individual or a small business owner will spend it on their own path. Stephen, great call. Thank you very much indeed. Lots and lots of messages coming in. Lots from the discussion with Bob Ward. People are very surprised that he thinks you can stop climate change. And a lot of concern that I had him on at all. But it is important to have people from both sides of the debate to try and create some balance. I get criticised sometimes for not having enough of that. But anyway, let's see what Paul in Tunbridge says. Paul, good afternoon.
Good afternoon there, Richard. Well, this fracking, when the budget came out, why didn't they say, look, we'll go halves with the energy companies, They forfeit all the bills for the moment. At the end of the day, when they start getting the gas out, keep 50% for the domestic market cheaply, let the energy firms sell the surplus abroad, tax-free, until they get all the money back that they've laid out.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's one way of doing it, Paul. My concern about what they're doing at the moment is they think this is a 6-month issue, but if Putin doesn't turn the taps on, prices remain high, then they're going to have to keep shelling more of our money out to the energy producers.
And well, the other way is, on the budget, I mean, we give £40 billion a year, isn't it, to that BBC?
I doubt it's 40 billion. I think it may be nearer 4 billion, but it's certainly a lot.
I thought it was something like 38 billion.
No, it's definitely not that. We can check it. I'm pretty sure it's 3 or 4 billion, but it's a lot, and we don't have any choice on it.
And that other energy national grid that we own, that generates about £3 or £4 billion a year, doesn't it, in profit?
It does, but I don't know about the amount of profit. National Grid actually is a stock market listed company here in London.
Why don't we get that back into our pocket?
That's a very good point. Should that be in national ownership? My preference actually is for 50-50. So you've got private sector management, private sector owning, or pension funds owning 50%, but the taxpayer owning the other 50%. It's like a win-win.
That's right, yeah. We should be going into things, not giving our energy a gain. Why don't they stop EDF from doing that nuclear and give it to Rolls-Royce, keep the jobs in this country? Why are we giving the new power station to EDF in China?
Yeah, you're so right. It really does worry me, Paul. It's simply not right, and we shouldn't let China anywhere near it.
See, Boris Johnson's old man, sorry, he's just so close to China, it's unbelievable.
Well, there have been certainly allegations about that. Paul, great call. Thank you very much indeed. That was Paul from Tunbridge. He is concerned about things like the ownership of our energy companies and whether we should nationalise some of it. And I've spoken about this before. I think, unfortunately, the energy producers, the wind farms, far too many of them are owned by rich foreign investors. Even the Danish government is, I think, the biggest single owner of our wind farms. It's not on. It's wrong. We're being ripped off. It's Tice Talk on Talk TV. Welcome back, my friends. Good afternoon. You're listening to Tice Talk. We've got about 40 minutes left of the show before the great Trisha Goddard is on from 1 o'clock till 4. And then, yes, he's back, Kevin O'Sullivan from 4 till 7. And then the incredible Mark Saggers from 7 onwards. Loads and loads of messages coming in. One congratulating me on getting Lorraine Allenson on here, but another not so happy. Richard, you're a fool. Finally get real. I agree with lots of what you say, but on climate, you're a fool. Well, there we are. But someone else says, Faye says, Bob Ward speaks about computer modelling, how it clearly shows climate warming. Computer modelling can only be based on the science's input. And Professor Neil Ferguson is a good example of how wrong you can get those predictions. So, you know, there is a lot about that. Computer modelling works if you put the right inputs, but garbage in equals garbage out. Anyway, let's see what Kim in Kent says. Hello, Kim.
Hello, Richard.
Hi, how are you? What news?
Well, we've had all this with the millennium bug and the hole in the ozone layer. We've had it for years, haven't we? The hole in the ozone layer, did it heal up? It was caused apparently by cow flatulence and McDonald's wrappers. And then we had the millennium bug where planes were going to fall out of the sky, there were going to be swarms of locusts, the world was going to end. These people are just doom mongers. I'm reading a book at the moment that is set in 1911. It's actually a factual book. And they had a year in 1911, like the year we've just had, weather-wise. There was no hysteria of any sort. People just accepted it and got on with it, like we did in 1976.
That's right, we just accepted it. You're not a fan of the experts, it sounds like, Kim.
Experts, you know, I mean, to who are these people experts? There are other experts who will say the exact opposite.
And that's a really good point, Kim. And Bob Ward, to his fairness, he talked about doctors. You know, if you go to one doctor and says, but my view is if it's really serious, you actually want to get a second opinion before making a decision.
Absolutely. And they made this mistake with COVID, and they keep on making the same mistakes because they let these people have free rein. They allow them to glue themselves to motorways. I mean, the whole thing's just crazy. These people, I think some of them really need to go and consult somebody and have a little chat on a sofa somewhere because, honest to God, all this is doing is ramping up the fear factor, causing division between people like most subjects do nowadays.
And it increases the price.
And exactly.
Yeah, absolute. Great call, Kim. Thank you so much indeed. I've got one here from Jill says, if global warming is a problem, why am I sitting with 3 jumpers on under a duvet listening to you talking utter rubbish? Absolutely priceless. There we go. And another one here says, Richard, is it correct that China wants to buy our gas infrastructure? That's from Louise. So the national grid is actually trying to sell all of the gas pipework infrastructure around most of the UK to a private equity group. The company that I've heard that is looking at it is the Australian group called Macquarie. So my concern, though, is, you know, this is part of our critical infrastructure, and it should not be sold to overseas investors. The US wouldn't allow it, the French wouldn't allow it, and I don't think we should allow it anyway. So lots of thoughts on that. There's another one here who says that, Richard, stick to what you know. Bob Ward is right. Look at the general trend. You're a scientific ignoramus. Well, I am looking at the trend. I'm looking at lots of different graphs, lots of different scientists, and I read lots about it. The point is, it's not all agreed. There are lots of very eminent scientists who actually have got a different view. And we all accept we're in a warming period, but maybe we need to look at adapting as opposed to trying to spend trillions of pounds on stopping something that I think most people say you can't stop. Climate change has gone on for a million of years. But anyway, we need to talk about something which is also happening in the news. There's so much going on, it's just incredible. But over the last few days, there has been footage emerging on social media about lots of unrest in cities across the whole of Iran, which is potentially really significant, and the authorities there, who are pretty brutal, trying to quell these. And I'm delighted now to be joined in the studio by Michael Binion, Foreign Affairs Specialist for The Times. Michael, great to see you. Thanks. For being with us. This happens from time to time, doesn't it? Unrest occurring in Iran, normally gets clamped down. What's going on, and why is it bubbled over this time, and how significant do you think this could be?
Well, I think it's pretty serious. There's a whole series of things that have built up to it. Obviously, the death in custody of this poor woman, Mahsa Amini, who was apparently beaten up for not wearing her hijab properly. She wasn't even accused of not having one. It wasn't fitted properly, taken into police custody. And that was the sort of straw that broke the camel's back. People thought that's just outrageous that these self-appointed morality police can go around beating women up for that sort of thing. But it added to general feeling of anger and discontent, living standards falling rapidly, inflation out of control, Iranian government clamping down here, there and everywhere, corruption at an all-time high, and people just feeling that they've had enough. And women generally, half the population feeling that they are really repressed and oppressed, and it's time to stand up.
Fascinating. I mean, it's... as I say, we do hear about this from time to time. I guess the question is whether or not this time it's different, or whether the authorities, the brutality of the police, whether they will win the day or not in clamping down. How quickly, I guess, it gathers momentum or not.
Yes, it's very hard to tell. I mean, a couple of years ago there were protests across the country, not just in the big cities, again about living standards and to do also with water shortages, where they felt that the government hadn't done anything to protect them or build, infrastructure. And they sort of fizzled out, usually because the authorities were pretty brutal. Yes, they do seem to be bigger, and they've gone on for longer this time. And also in one or two towns, particularly on the frontier with Iraq, there was a town where the authorities lost control, and the protesters more or less occupied the town, took over control for, well, probably not more than a few hours, but it was a symbol of general mass discontent.
And there's some suggestion that actually some of the security forces may even be defecting. A friend of mine who is Iranian, he messaged me saying... he says that this is different, and that every city and town is experiencing riots, protesting. Some have been taken over by the rebels, and that in a sense, because Putin's distracted, there may be less help being given to the authorities and the regime in Tehran. Do you think there's any validity to that?
Well, it's difficult to tell, because there have been these pretty widespread riots from time to time. I mean, the last really mass demonstration was after the election of Ahmadinejad as president, and we're talking 10 years ago or so, and the Green Revolution, as it was then called, and the authorities cracked down really hard. And if you are brutal enough, as Saddam Hussein found in Iraq next door, if you are brutal enough, you really, in the end, can get the upper hand, and you can repress whatever's going on. And it's pretty clear that this regime and Raisi, the present hardline president, is ready to be brutal enough and to send in as many troops as needed to quell it. So I fear that although the crackdown and the riots are pretty serious, I'm not very hopeful that it will lead to lasting change.
Interesting. And if actually it was different, if essentially there was a significant shift, and if the regime, for example, fell, would that almost certainly guarantee a sort of descent into the chaos one saw in Iraq or Libya? Or are there different reasons why it might be different in Iran?
Well, we're certainly not going to get a sudden outbreak of democracy. I mean, that wouldn't happen. We won't go straight from a dictatorship to a kind of liberal democracy. What would happen is that those with the most to gain, and that would probably be the Revolutionary Guard, would see their chance and they would step in, and effectively you would have a similar but different sort of regime, where you would have a dictatorship of these self-appointed Islamist guardians, those who've done well, and those actually who've been the most corrupt economically and got control of the economy. They want to hang on to their gains. So they'd probably take over, but whether that would signal much change for the average person, I doubt.
That sort of sounds like a continuation of the brutality of a dictatorship, just under a different titular head or something. Yeah,
I think that's likely. I mean, people say, well, what happens when a tough regime falls? Well, very often hardliners, just as hardline, take over. In fact, the same speculation has gone on in Russia. If they push Putin out, would it be, a liberalisation? No, it would be another hardliner comes in.
Yes, that's right. It was suggested to me that actually Iran is different because the percentage of, I think it's just Shia Muslims, is so much higher than in other nations, over 95%, and that therefore that might be different if there was a change of regime.
Well, yes. I mean, you wouldn't have sectarian fighting. You wouldn't have the same as you have in Iraq, where you've got Shia pitched against Sunni, because, as you say, it's entirely a Shia country, virtually entirely. And there is a great sense of nationhood. Iran is a very old and proud culture, and therefore there is a sense, we are a country that matters. So there would be a certain amount of cohesion there. But that wouldn't stop those who are determined to take power and benefit for themselves trying to get a grip on it.
Yeah, I mean it's going to be extraordinary to sort of to watch and see. It just sort of the suggestion that this time could be different.
Well, it could be. Yes,
and there's so much else going on in the world.
Yes, that's right. I mean, the world is distracted. I mean, the Ukraine crisis is clearly the thing that the West is worrying about most. Iran is meant to be on the point of signing a deal with America on stopping nuclear proliferation, or not going ahead with the nuclear development of a bomb. That's, is it not going to happen? We don't know. But we'll see.
And I guess Israel, in particular, will be looking at this more closely than everybody.
Oh, yes. The Israelis have made it pretty clear that if there is not any reduction in Iranian threats to Israel or to stability in the region, they will possibly take preemptive action.
Do you think they would want some form of regime change, or would actually the uncertainty of what might come after sort of slightly better the devil you know?
Well, that's hard to tell. I mean, they would... The Israelis have been in two minds as to whether they want a deal that would curb Iran's nuclear potential. Of course, it wouldn't stop it altogether. It would probably just slow it down. Whether to have that deal or to have an outright confrontation with Iran, in which case there would be probably a real serious bust-up with the United States and others, could lead to war or something of that kind. And the Israelis are not sure. I mean, they just want a tough line against Iran. And whether that means the collapse of this government or this hardliner president and supreme leader, we're not sure.
No, I mean, it's always worrying when there's uncertainty, when there's the risk of regime change, particularly when, they've been essentially, they've been looking for to create uranium to create nuclear bombs.
Well, that is the big worry, of course. I mean, the Iranians are pretty close to being able to do so. There have been a lot of attempts to assassinate the top nuclear scientists. Some of them have succeeded. There's been disruption. There's been economic as well as actually computer sabotage, where they have managed to really disrupt the entire computer program running the nuclear program. So there's quite a close watch on it. And of course the interesting thing there is the Russians themselves actually also would like to see a curb on Iran's nuclear program, but they're not sure whether to help get a deal or whether to disrupt it, because that would upset the Americans. And at the moment, the priority for the Russians is to upset and anger the West.
That is for sure. Interesting message coming here from Liz, who says it's a case of be careful what you wish for. It was protest marches mainly by students who ousted the Shah and demanded Khomeini back into Iran from his exile in France back in the late 70s.
79, yes, 79. I remember it well.
Yeah.
Indeed, and everyone thought that Khomeini would come in with a sort of new, more people-based government, more sensitive to religious feeling. Well, in fact, he came in with a program for Islamic dictatorship.
Yeah, there you are. Michael, thank you so much indeed for those thoughts on what's going on elsewhere in the world, in the Middle East, in Iran. Lots of demonstrations, lots of protests. Is it going to be different this time? Is it better the devil you know? We will keep a close eye on that. That was Michael Binion, the Foreign Affairs Specialist for The Times. Thank you very much for that. Keep those calls coming in. Keep these tweets coming in. Loads of them here. We've got one that says... what was this saying? Why no mention of Iran's ban on female footballers and spectators? Why they're in the World Cup group? Very good question, to be honest. I don't know the answer to that. Lots here. One here about the discussion with Bob, saying, Bob sounds more like Saint Greta. God help us, except he can't save me. There we are. It's a really good discussion, actually, with Bob Ward. We'll definitely get that back on. I can't believe how quickly the time flew by. one here message from Barbara. Barbara says, Richard, I will listen to scientists, but will come to my own conclusions. I refuse to be brainwashed by scientists, as your guest was doing. And I think that is the point. We've got to debate this. There are many very eminent scientists who have a different view, and I will get them back on, and they'll get others back on, because I think it is important to discuss it, and then you can form your own view. This is, you know, arguably it's one of the most important things, the whole thrust from the Westminster parties going headlong towards net zero. I'm all for cleaner air, reducing emissions so we get quieter, cleaner cities, but the idea that you actually sort of think that you can stop climate change, I just don't believe that is possible. I don't think the majority of people think that is possible. But there we had an expert, Bob Ward, who does think it's possible. And he works at the Grantham Institute. I know that some of the donors there, the Grantham Foundation, they think you can not only stop climate change, you can reverse it. It's on their website. But don't worry, folks. UK taxpayers, we're spending almost £7 million at that institute at the London School of Economics. Stay with us. We'll take your calls, 0344 499 1000, before 1 o'clock, when, of course, Trisha Goddard will be here, and then Kevin O'Sullivan. It's Tice Talk, Talk TV. Welcome back, my friends, into the last 15 minutes or so of Tice Talk before Trisha Goddard at 1. Lots of messages coming in here. Fred, he says, Richard, fracking's a great idea, but it wouldn't affect the price of gas unless it's used specifically for the UK and not part of the international supply. Fred, you are exactly right. That is the point. And guess what? That's what they do in the United States, where they use their shale gas domestically. That's why their gas price is just 25% of our gas price. Just 25%. Imagine that. You can have long-term fixed-price contracts so that the producers of the shale gas, the extractors, they've got a certainty of income. You have that from government-backed contracts and suppliers. And then guess what? Yeah, you keep it in the UK and you have a lower price. It also saves CO2 by a factor of about 3, and it's cheaper anyway because you haven't got the transport costs and the costs of liquefying the gas in Qatar into LNG, transiting on ships and then re-vaporising it. Funny how the MPs don't seem to know this stuff, is it, when they talk a load of twaddle. Anyway, let's go to London where Pat's on the line. Hi, Pat.
Oh, hello there. Look, I've got a theory, about in the last 108 years, you've had 2 world wars. You've had, Nagasaki, Hiroshima, and countless in-atmosphere atomic tests. You've had Korea, Vietnam. You've had the Gulf War. You've got Ukraine. All this can't be any good for the environment and ecosystem. When you look at it, I mean, you go back to the 50s and 60s, how many, in atmosphere are these atolls in the Pacific atomic tests and getting bigger every year? The kilotonnage getting bigger every year, like going from ordinary atomic to to hydrogen. I mean, they say it dissipates, but does it? And you've got you had all these volcanoes that have gone off, Mount St. Helens and all that, and it must. I don't care who would be there sitting there, maybe like that other bloke you had on there. I don't care who you are. That must be taken into account. That must be. Because you had...
there's no question. I think anybody... war is bad, full stop.
Because you had all industries going headlong to create bullets, guns, tanks...
Weapons, ammunition. That's absolutely right.
So all that must add up to what we're experiencing now, or it must have a say in it.
Oh, without question, absolutely without question, Pat. And war is bad. We want to stop wars, but sometimes, regrettably, they happen. That is a question of fact. Great call, Pat. Thank you very much for that. We're going to stay in London. Just before that, just a message here that's come in about the discussion with Bob Ward. Bob Ward is exaggerating. I give up. Ridiculous. I want to die. From John. Don't die, John. Stay with us. Keep listening. That is for sure. Nigel in London. Good afternoon. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon, Richard. I've been listening to your debate with interest and enthusiasm, and I was keen about a couple of points, really. I think fracking is a bit like the Heathrow Airport third runway. It's never going to happen because we've been debating about it for the next 20 years. And in relation to protest, if there is fracking, the police are so lazy and so woke, they just let protest happen, cause civil unrest for weeks and weeks on end, and nothing will be done about it because the police do nothing about disorder when it comes to protest. And it's very, very shameful that we're paying them for service which we don't get.
It is so concerning. And if you have seen in some of the papers, apparently, those lovely people at Just Stop Oil, they're now planning weeks and weeks of shutting down parts of central London again, and it'll be very interesting to see what the police do about that. It doesn't sound like you're very thrilled with the way they deal with them.
No, and this has been proven time and time again. You can't allow protesters to shut down cities, towns, motorways, roads and villages for days and weeks. And give them their half an hour of sitting in the road, waving their banners, shouting and screaming, and give them half an hour. Then move them on. And if they don't move them on, there's an offence called obstructing the highway or obstructing a police officer. You just cannot allow the economy to be ground to a halt because people don't agree with other people's views and opinions.
Quite right. Nigel, I think you're quite right. We need the police to deal with them promptly. We like protest, but not. That doesn't give you the right to disrupt and ruin other people's lives and ability to earn. Great call, Nigel. Thank you very much indeed for that. Lots of other messaging here. One from Foy says, Bob Ward speaks about modelling, computer modelling, and how it clearly shows climate warming. Yeah, but computer modelling is only based on the scientific input. So that is a clear point there. Another one says, how do you become an expert in something that's going to happen? This is from the Lincolnshire Poacher, who says, I've checked on Amazon, and at present they're not selling time machines. Yeah, very good point. Well, let's quickly go to Harlow, where Brian is on the line. Hi, Brian.
Oh, hi, Richard. There's a couple of questions I want to ask you at the end, but I'll just do a quick brief. I was the happiest day of my life when we left the EU, and they said they stop immigration. They've issued 1 million visas this year, plus 30,000 coming in from the Channel. Also, Boris Johnson promised to cut VAT straight away. He ain't done that. But that's just my brief encounter. But there's two things I want to ask you, Richard. When this price comes in at 2,500, does that mean I'm already paying 3,000? Does it mean that I will now pay 2,500?
No. My understanding of what it means, Brian, is that it basically caps the rate per kilowatt hour that you are paying. So if you live in an average house and you have average use per year, that capped rate will mean that it'll add up to about £2,500. So that's the average. Right. But obviously, if you use more than the average, then your bill will be higher. If you use, and the reverse is true.
I understand that, yeah. I mean, I know it's kilowatt hours because I based that before. Okay, there's one other thing. The Chancellor promised to keep the triple lock, right? When September came, the triple lock CPI was 9.9%. Are they going to give pensioners a 9.9% raise in pensions this year?
That's a really good question, and I don't know the answer to that. We'll try and find that out and get that back, because that has been ebbing and flowing. Sunak was talking about it. The last I think I heard is that they are planning to reinstate it, Brian, sorry. But I'm not 100% on that. He was silent on it on Friday. There is another budget coming and talked about in November. But again, this is it, isn't it? You know, inflation is so high. He hasn't lifted the indexation for people in work in terms of before they start paying income tax.
I'm a pensioner, Richard, and unfortunately, I'm in a position where I pay tax. I already pay tax. I mean, I pay quite a lot of tax because I was lucky because I put my money to good results. But there's lots of people that haven't, and basically, this budget, I agree, everything you said, I think it was a massive disaster.
Well, thank you very much, Brian. Great call. Stay listening. We've just had another message here from John, who says, brilliant, you got Bob Ward rattled. Although much as I'm doubtful about Richard's stance, I think Richard kept his cool and won. Well, we had a great spirited debate, and I think that's really important, and people can form different sides of it. Another one said here, Bob Ward, excellent scrap with Richard Tice. Check out the pin tweet from one of my previous guests, Dr. Gerald Cutney. That is the point. At least we're having the debate. A message here says the climate debate was making the rich richer and the poor poorer. Many people can't afford heat pumps. I think that is absolutely right. I'm not sure they work either unless it's in a relatively new house with very little air circulation. Paul is in Kent. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Richard. I'd just like to say this. The situation about warming, the warming question. When I was a youngster, I remember all the papers, all the news, and especially the BBC, were putting out their experts about the big freeze, and we were going into a new ice age. And all the experts, the money they spent on cores and everything else that they did, all that's been swept under the carpet. We now know that they're not listening. There's two Americans that took those core samples that know very well that we've had heating far beyond what we've got now. Why do they do this? It just amazes me how they get away with it.
Paul, you're so right, and actually, I've got in front of me the front cover of the Radio Times on the 16th of November, 1974. Yes, I haven't got the whole lot here, but, and it says, the headline on it is, "The Ice Age Cometh." And that was from the BBC. You remember that?
But it weren't. Yeah, I remember the
discussions that were going on about it in relation to the so-called, experts that you just said on. He was one of them. he had an opinion about that then, when he was a lot younger. And I can tell you this, right, that was when he was like student age, I should imagine.
No, I think the point is that the experts don't always get it right, and that's why you've got to have that debate. You've got to pit the scientists against each other. What troubles me, Paul, is that you get a sense that those on the other side of the debate, from the sort of the climate change lot, they try and smear people and sort of label you and say that you're bad people, as opposed to trying to win the debate.
Oh, I won't have none of that. I don't have none of that. I'll just say it as it comes. I mean, at the end of the day, people like yourself, I don't know how you consider Farage or how you consider Nigel.
He's a good friend of mine.
People like you and Nigel, we need in government. We need people that are going to say as it is. We're not having... I mean, they should never really have got rid of Boris. He was doing some good. He was doing certainly better than this block we got in. Oh, my God. What's going to happen now? I don't know.
Well,
but we've been in worse situations than this before. We've owed a lot more money than this before.
You're absolutely right. We have. And, I'm not worried about the quantity of sovereign debt. What I'm worried about is creating the maximum growth fastest and benefiting the most people, ordinary people on ordinary incomes, up and down the country, and that I think that's the way to create the fastest growth. Great call, Paul. Thank you very much indeed. We've just got time to go to Steve in Nottingham. Good afternoon, Steve.
Hello, Richard. Great show. I'd just like to say